Chapter 2010. Such arrogance. Suddenly, light twisted in the air, and Huang Chang appeared next to Zhao Go. He looked at Huang Yaoshe disdainfully. That year at the sword meet of Mount Hua, how many masters did not participate? Do you really think you can rank in the top 5? Huang Yaoshe indifferently said, although I am a proud and aloof person, I am not an arrogant person. Naturally, I know that there are many experts who disdain to participate. But although my martial arts cannot be ranked among the top 5 in the world, I have never failed to kill someone in all these years. As soon as he finished speaking, he shot a flick deity towards the center of Zhao Go's brows. The sharp little pebble whizzed past with endless inner force, and everyone's ears went numb from the shock. Even if it was a master, let alone a normal person, if it hit the center of the brows, their head would probably explode. Huang Yaoshe's martial arts skill was very high. His sudden attack, coupled with the hatred in his heart, was perhaps the most powerful attack he had used in the last several decades. Not to mention the ordinary imperial bodyguards. Even the imperial weapons were unable to react in time. Only Li Yanshi, who had always been cautious and had been secretly on guard, was able to quickly draw his saber and block in front of the pebble. When the pebble and the saber collided, there was a crisp sound. His saber had already broken into 2. The pebble also turned to dust after being hit so hard. But Li Yanshi was not happy at all. Because the pebble scattered in all directions, the fragments also shot toward Zhao Go with great power. It was like a storm of pear blossom needles shooting towards him. At this moment, Li Yanshi even suspected that all of this was part of Huang Yaoshe's plan. He calculated that someone would stop him, so he purposely chose this special stone to catch people off guard. The web between his thumb and forefinger was numb. How could he still have the strength to protect Zhao Go? Ding Dian and the rest of the imperial weapons finally reacted and planned to act, but Huang Yaoshe's whole body flew over like lightning. The imperial weapons had no choice but to stop him. They watched as the countless hidden weapons shot toward Zhao Go. If they hit him, he would be turned into a beehive. All of this took a long time to describe, but it all happened in a flash. At that moment, Huang Chang suddenly attacked. He didn't seem to do anything, but he just swept his sleeve in front of Zhao Go. All the stones that had been whistling in the air disappeared, as if his sleeve was a bottomless black hole. Many people stared at Huang Yaoshe's sleeve in astonishment. It should be known that Huang Yaoshe's name was much more resounding in Jianghu than any ordinary person. His determined strike was easily neutralized, and his famous consummate skill couldn't even pierce through his opponent's sleeve. This was really too shocking. Of course, only the few people closest to Zhao Go knew Huang Chang's identity, and they all acted as if it was only natural. At this time, Huang Yaoshe pushed left and right and suddenly jumped out of the ring. He stood 10 feet away and frowned as he looked at Zhang Wuji. This stance seems to be the flying silk strength from the 9-yin manual. To be able to use the flying silk power to such perfection, you must be Huang Chang. When his wife died because of the 9-yin manual, he swore that he would never practice the 9-yin manual again. But later on, his daughter and son-in-law were lucky enough to learn this martial art. Naturally, he also recognized the martial arts in the manual. It should be known that Guojing had practiced the 9-yin manual to the point where he could use both hardness and softness. But when this mysterious elder in front of him attacked, it felt as if he had returned to his natural state. He had truly reached the realm of nature, and his level was much higher than Guojing's. In addition, he knew of Huang Chang's existence beforehand, so he was able to confirm the identity of the person in front of him. Huang Chang said calmly, "At that time, the country had just stabilized, and the people of Jianghu were fierce and aggressive. If they were incited by people with ulterior motives, it would be very easy for the country to split up again. So we could only think of a way to divert their attention. What happened to you was only because you were greedy. Who can you blame? His entire family had died at the hands of the people of Jianghu, so naturally he did not have a good impression of the people of Jianghu." Good. Huang Yaoshe laughed coldly. "The people of Jianghu are all hot-blooded men who want to protect the country, but in your eyes, they are just fierce and aggressive people. You even purposely planned to get rid of them. What a joke." Zhao Go finally spoke. "You are just a peasant. how would you know about the matters of the court? Governing a country requires choices, and naturally there will be sacrifices. You still have the nerve to talk about governing a country. Huang Yaoshi's tone was cold. Originally, if you were a good emperor, I would have tolerated this matter for the sake of the greater good. But what have you done all these years? Internally, you killed Yu Fei, destroyed your own Great Wall, and suppressed the peasant army. Externally, you wag your tail and beg for mercy, and pledge allegiance to the Jin. When both sides exchange letters, you can only call yourself the loyal emperor. Every time the Jin send an envoy, you have to respectfully receive the edict, right? Such a cowardly emperor. Why not kill him and keep him? Bastard. Zhao could not help but be angry. Huang Chang's face darkened, and he said, "Those who speak of war may not necessarily be brave." It was not easy for the country to settle down. If we start a war, won't the people be the ones to suffer in the end? Huang Yaoshi replied, "You make it sound so dignified, but Zhao can become the emperor. Isn't it because he is the only surviving prince of Huizhong? All the generals saw him as their leader, but how many soldiers did he have at the time? Most of the country's army is controlled by a few generals. If we continue to fight with the Jin, the power of the army will grow, and when that time comes, there will be people who will follow Taizu's example and wear the yellow robe. The Zhao and Song dynasties have always guarded against military generals, and this concerns his own throne. How can Zhao tolerate such a thing?" Huang Shang frowned. The right to drink wine and let go of military power is Taizu's national policy. Back then, the warlords of the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms fought with each other. Are those days any better? I only know that all of you are sacrificing the interests of others. It's fine if you look down on us Jianghu bumpkins. Huang Yaoshi's voice became more and more severe, but Zhao sacrificed the interests of the whole country to humiliate the Jin for peace, and in turn, took care of all the famous generals in the country. Why did Miao Fu and Lu Jingyan start a rebellion? And why did Lu Guangshi's 40,000 soldiers surrender to the Jin in a fit of anger? Other people don't know, but don't you know? It's all thanks to Han Shizhong, Yu Fei, and the others' blind loyalty. Otherwise, how could he sit on the throne? Elder Huang, kill this arrogant man. Zhao couldn't hold it in any longer, and he was furious. Huang Shang also knew that he couldn't let him continue like this. If it affected the morale of the army, it would be troublesome. After all, they had to defeat Jia, Dao this time, and they couldn't afford to make any mistakes. With a thought, he appeared in front of Huang Yaoshi, and his jade-like hand reached for his shoulder. Huang Yaoshi had been on high alert. Hastily, he used all the skills he had learned in his life to fight the enemy. The divine sword palm of the fallen flower was unleashed to the extreme, mixed with the 5 revolutions of Qi Min and fierce wind that he had been studying for the next sword meet on Mount Hua to deal with the other 5 masters. Unfortunately, no matter how hard he tried to dodge, the jade-like claws still followed him like a shadow, enveloping his vital acupoints. At that moment, he seemed to understand how Xiaoxiangzi and Yin Kashi felt. One day, he met Yang Guo by chance at an inn, and Yang martial arts had improved greatly. The two couldn't help but fight against each other, and Xiaoxiangzi and Yin Kashi happened to run into each other, and they used their palms to push each other around like a ball. Xiaoxiangzi, Yin Kashi, and Nimiqing were known as the 3 heroes of Mongolia. Back then, they had almost killed Guo Jing together with Jinlu and Fuwang, so their martial arts weren't weak. In the end, no matter how hard they tried to resist, they were still pushed around by the two. After that, they were laughed at as the 3 balls of Mongolia. Huang Yaoshi suddenly had the same feeling. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't stop his opponent's casual grab. But he was still one of the 5 greats, and in a moment of crisis, he used his special skill, the divine flicking finger. Finally, his opponent's hand revealed an opening, and he took the opportunity to retreat. Huang Yaoshi made a sound of surprise, but with a flick of his wrist, he seized the opportunity to grab Huang Yaoshi's waist. The whole process was done in one go, without any delay. Huang Yaoshi didn't dare to use any more fancy moves, and used the divine flicking finger for every move. He concentrated and blocked more than 10 moves in a row. His forehead was soaked in cold sweat, and he felt the pressure increasing. His movements were becoming more and more difficult to move. He knew that in another 3 moves, he wouldn't be able to hold on. At that moment, a gray shadow suddenly broke through the courtyard wall, and a fist flew towards Huang Yaoshi's body. This fist was as fast as lightning, and the wind from the fist blew up the small courtyard. "Watch out!" Li Yanshi and the others only had time to shout, but they didn't have time to react. Seeing that the fist was about to hit, Huang Yaoshi calmly smiled. "I've been waiting for you for a long time." If he hadn't held back his strength, how could Huang Yaoshi have lasted this long? Huang Yaoshi waved his sleeve, and a thin, crystal-like hand reached out to grab the human vein gate. That person quickly changed his move, and his fist directly collided with the opponent's hand. With a loud sound, the 2 figures separated. Huang Yaoshi stood with his hands behind his back, while his opponent's fist had a faint trace of blood. It was obvious that his opponent had suffered a great loss in that exchange. Everyone carefully looked at the gray shadow and saw that he had thick eyebrows and big eyes. His face had a simple air to it, and the most important thing was that he looked like a youth. Everyone was shocked. Which youth in this world had the strength to take on Huang Yaoshi's attack head-on? Ding Dian was half a person of Jianghu. Even though he had become an imperial guard, he still paid attention to the situation in Jianghu. Naturally, he recognized this youth who had once shown at the Golden Snake gathering, Shirpatian. Huang Yaoshi said in a low voice, "Last time in Yujin Garden, it was you who lured him away and caused Han Jiefu's death. This time, I will settle this debt with you." Look, it was obvious that the youth was not good with words. He only retorted with a red face. "That person is not a good person. So you are a good person?" Huang Yaoshi coldly snorted. He remembered that last time, it was because of this stinky brat that he made a mistake and caused Han Jiejo to die in the palace. Because of this, the balance in the court that the emperor had worked so hard to maintain was completely broken. In the end, he had no choice but to set up this trip to Wudong. Just now, he had been preparing to plot against him, so when he saw the youth's simple appearance, he became even more angry. As soon as he finished speaking, he attacked his opponent. Shirpatian was not good with words to begin with, and with Huang Yaoshi's merciless attacks, he had no time to be distracted. He could only use 120% of his concentration to fight back. Not far away, the dojo monk watched with amazement. I wonder what kind of fortuitous encounter this youth had. His internal energy has actually reached the level where dragon and tiger meet. Water and fire complement each other. With such a high level of internal energy, every movement of his is extremely powerful. Furthermore, his moves are so mysterious. There's a hint of the Isle of Chivalry style, but there's also a difference in strength. He had traveled the world these past few years and had seen many things. Years ago, he had seen Zhang San and Li Si fight in secret. Even though this youth's martial arts were very different from Zhang San and Li Si's, when one's martial arts reached such a high level, he could naturally look at the source of the martial arts. Only then could he see that the youth's martial arts came from the same source as Zhang San and Li Si. Huang Yaoshi, on the other hand, was frowning slightly. With his eyesight, he could quickly see that even though Shi Potion's martial arts were high, his experience was too shallow. If he were to fight against other masters, he could often rely on his exceptional internal energy to crush his opponent. But today, the person he was facing was a grandmaster. His internal energy was no weaker than Huang Yaoshi's, and his battle experience was far superior. Naturally, it did not take long for him to gradually fall into a disadvantageous position. It was only by relying on his incomparably dense internal energy and some marvelous moves that he was able to hold on for a short period of time. He looked at Zhao Go with some reluctance. After the exchange just now, he knew the difference between himself and a grandmaster. If he insisted on assassinating Shirpatian now, the monk would definitely make a move, and he would definitely return empty-handed. Rather than that, he might as well cooperate with this youth to stall Huang Chong and leave the rest to the others. He was an extremely intelligent person and instantly analyzed the pros and cons of the situation. His figure flashed, and he entered the battle circle to help Sherpatian. With his participation, Sherpatian gradually turned the tables. Huang Chang could not help but frown slightly. Actually, whether it was Sherpatian or Huang Yaoshe, if they fought one-on-one, it would not be too difficult for Huang Chang to defeat the other. Maybe Sherpatian would be a little more troublesome, but it would only be a matter of a few more moves. But if the two of them worked together, it would not be as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. It must be known that Sherpatian, whether it was his internal energy or his moves, had actually already touched the threshold of the Grandmaster level. All he lacked was the accumulation of a few decades of experience and a deeper understanding of martial arts. It was not an exaggeration to call him a half-step Grandmaster. Huang Yaoshe, on the other hand, did not lack experience or knowledge. What he lacked was his internal energy. Therefore, he stood on the side and watched over Sherpatian. Many of Huang Chang's fake moves were resolved by Huang Yaoshe, while Huang Chang's real moves were handled by Sherpatian. In this way, the two of them worked together and actually managed to fight to a draw. This was similar to the Battle of Shaoshi Mountain, when Xiaofeng fought against Yu Tanji and Murong Fu. Yu Tanji's internal energy was profound, and at the same time, it was mixed with the yin poison, which made Xiaofeng feel restricted in every aspect. However, it was not difficult for Xiaofeng to defeat him. Murong Fu, on the other hand, was rich in actual combat experience, and his moves were exquisite, but his internal energy was insufficient, which made it easy for Xiaofeng to defeat him. However, it just so happened that the two of them worked together, and their strengths complemented each other, making Xiaofeng feel restricted in every aspect. If it was not for Duan Yu pulling one of them away in time, even if Xiaofeng managed to win in the end, he would have to pay a heavy price. Zhao Go, who was standing on the side, had a gloomy expression. He hurriedly said to the drunkard monk, "Great master, please help Mr. Jinshan." The drunkard monk shook his head. "If I join in, won't I be disrespecting Brother Jinshan?" "Don't worry, sir. Brother Jinshan's cultivation base is world-shaking. Even if the opponents work together, they will only be able to last 100 or 200 moves. They will not be able to escape death in the end." However, Zhao Go said, "Great master, please understand that this is not a martial arts competition in the Jianghu, but a matter that concerns the survival of the country. As the saying goes, even a lion will use its full strength to capture a rabbit. At this time, we don't know how many masters are hiding in the dark. If we don't take advantage of this opportunity to get rid of the two masters on the other side, they will swarm us later, and it will cause some variables to appear out of thin air." The drunkard monk was stunned. What Sir says is not without reason. If that's the case, this old monk will not care about those empty titles. Amipa. Although he was prepared to attack, he did not want to launch a sneak attack. So, he took a step forward and shouted the name of Buddha to remind the other party. However, he suddenly paused and looked to the side thoughtfully. "Great monk, your opponent is me. What's the point of bullying a junior?" At this moment, a figure slowly walked out of the bamboo forest. Please remember this book's domain name. Com. Wonderful Book House mobile version website. Com. Chapter 2011. Everyone in the courtyard was startled. When did this person come? Why didn't they sense him earlier? Everyone looked towards the direction of the voice and saw that the person was wearing a plain white robe. His hair was as white as snow, but it was completely different from the white hair of a normal old man. His hair gave off a faint glow. He stood there casually, and his entire body seemed to give off a celestial air. Unfortunately, his face was covered by a mask. The Imperial Guards had no time to guess his identity. But this did not include the drunkard monk. At their level of martial arts, they could recognize people not just by their eyes, but by remembering a person's aura. Seeing the white-haired old man slowly walk over, the drunkard monk had a surprised expression. "Brother Chongyang, I didn't think you were involved in this." Hearing his words, everyone present was shocked. There is only one person in the world who could face a grandmaster so casually, also called Chongyang. The central theurgy, Wang Chongyang. The man smiled and said, "Big monk, I was careless and lost to you in a drinking contest in the pavilion. I've been looking for an opportunity to regain my face. Unfortunately, you've always been traveling the world. I couldn't find you even if I wanted to. I really didn't waste any effort today." Hearing him admit his identity, Xiaogo couldn't help but be furious. "Wang Chongyang, your Wang family is deeply trusted by me. Many of the Wang family's descendants are officials in the imperial court, and all of them are loyal to the emperor. Why did you commit such a treacherous act? Aren't you afraid of dragging down the thousands of people in the Wang family?" Wang Chongyang turned around to look at him. He didn't care about his scolding. The winner takes all. Once this is done, who will hold the Wang family accountable? Xiaogo laughed coldly. "You seem very confident." Wang Chongyang said lightly. "If I didn't have confidence, how could I have been the first in the world for so many years?" The drunkard monk chuckled. "Brother Chongyang, aren't your words a bit too arrogant? It's not like you don't know the truth behind the sword duel on Mount Hua. Do you really think you are the first in the world?" Wang Chongyang turned around and looked at him playfully. "Big monk, I originally thought you were a monk and had already seen through the three words: greed, anger, and obsession. Now, it seems that you are just a normal person." The drunkard monk didn't take it seriously. "I've been a monk and a Taoist all my life. I've been playing around in the human world all day long. I thought I could transcend, but I'm still in the secular world after all. It's only natural that I have some secular thoughts." Wang Chongyang laughed. "Big monk, you're quite honest. I'm beginning to admire you more and more." The drunkard monk looked at him for a long time before he said, "I used to admire Brother Chongyang very much, but seeing you here today, I really don't understand. How did the great hero who was loyal to his country and ran around to fight against the Jin become like this?" Wang Chongyang sighed. "Big monk, didn't you already tell me the reason? Did I tell you the reason?" The drunkard monk was confused. Wang Chongyang said, "In my early years, I vowed to fight against the Jin. After the rebellion of Jinkong, I organized many volunteer armies in the Central Plains to fight against the Jin. But who would have thought that the imperial court would surrender to the Jin and ask for peace? All the volunteer armies in the Central Plains lost hope and foreign aid. In the end, they were annihilated by the Jin. Now, only the Redcoat Army is still struggling at death's door. Do you know how many Redcoat armies there were in the Central Plains?" He originally had an aloof demeanor, but now that he was talking about this, he was extremely pained. Obviously, he was really angry. The drunkard monk was stunned. "So you and Island Master Huang are both radical warmongers. Just for this, you actually dared to risk the world? To commit such a heinous crime and change the world?" Wang Chongyang glanced at him and sighed. "Big monk, you are an outsider and may not have cared about these things. But all these years, I have been watching coldly from the sidelines. Everyone knows about Yu Fei's grievance, so I won't talk about it. I won't talk about how the emperor used his favorite officials, Wang Boyan and Huang Qianshan, to force Miao Fu and Lu Jingyan to rebel. I won't talk about how the emperor used his favorite official, Zhang Jun, to make trouble, forcing tens of thousands of soldiers in Huaishi to surrender to the Jin. Back then, Zhongzhe's husband racked his brains and contacted all the volunteer armies in the Central Plains. After much difficulty, he finally managed to reclaim the ruins of the Central Plains, but in the end, he was mentally and physically exhausted and died in office. Our official immediately sent his trusted aide, Du Chong, to take over his position. This man feared the Jin like a tiger, but he was extremely cruel to his own people. When the Jin invaded the south, many people fled from the north. Du Chong was afraid that they were spies of the Jin, so he killed them all, regardless of whether they were men or women, old or young, to chill the hearts of the people. At the same time, he gave up on the volunteer armies that Zhongzhe had worked so hard to win over, and watched as they were defeated by the Jin one by one. Not only that, he also rejected the armed forces that Zhongzhe had recruited as potential enemies. As the saying goes, like-minded people. If the emperor's favorite officials are all like this, you can imagine what kind of situation he is in. Li Yinsher could not help but interrupt. Du Chong is a man who loves fame, but has no talent. The emperor also made a mistake. After all, The emperor may know a person's face, but not his heart. General Wang is going too far by blaming the emperor for this. In his early years, Wang Chongyang had led the revolutionary army in the Central Plains to fight against the Jins. Coupled with the illustrious family background of the Linchuan Wang family, he had been bestowed with several titles of general. If Song Qingshu was here, he would immediately realize that Wang Chongyang was most likely the mysterious general of the Mansion of Spirits. You don't blame him? Wang Chongyang laughed coldly. When the Jin invaded the south for the second time, Du Chong commanded a large army. He did not dare to face Wanyan Zonwang's eastern army head-on. His only countermeasure was to open up the Yellow River's dikes and let the water of the Yellow River flow into the Huai River from the Sisui River in an attempt to stop the pursuing troops. Unfortunately, not only did the river not stop the Jin Eastern Army, it caused more than 200,000 people to drown. The death toll from a plague was several times that of this. The most prosperous area of the Lianghuai River was destroyed. Nearly 10 million people became homeless and became refugees. Du Chong did such an outrageous thing and lost all the land north of the Yangtze River. When he returned to the capital, not only did the emperor not blame him, he even made him the right chief minister and appointed him as the Jianghuai Proclamation envoy to guard Jiankong. This kind of emperor, huh? Li Yinsher noticed that Zhao Gou's face was as black as charcoal. He knew that, as the emperor, it was not convenient for him to refute the emperor's words. He spoke on his behalf. When the Jin were strong, all the defending troops were defeated and the land north of the river was lost. This cannot be blamed on Du Chong. Moreover, after the Lianghuai River fell into the hands of the Jin, if it was still as prosperous as before, wouldn't it be able to provide an endless supply of food to the Jin? Wang Chongyang couldn't help but be stunned. In the end, he shook his head and sighed. Li Yinsher, you are the emperor's most trusted bodyguard. If you say that, he must be thinking the same way. For an emperor like this, I can only say that it is the misfortune of the people of the world and the misfortune of the Song dynasty. Zhao Gou finally couldn't help but explode. Wang Haofeng, you talk about national righteousness, but this time you participated in the case of rebellion. In the end, isn't it because your Wang family and the Jia family are in-laws? Your second brother's eldest daughter is Jia Shidao's wife. Your second brother's eldest daughter, Wang Shifeng, is the daughter-in-law of the Jia family. Your Wang family and the Jia family are clearly in cahoots, but you speak nonsense here, pretending to be a saint? I originally thought that you were generous and kind. I would never participate in such a dirty thing. I didn't expect that I had overestimated your character. Originally, after being listed by Huang Yaoshe and Wang Chongyang, many of the bodyguards present were a little shaken. They felt that their emperor was indeed a bit unbearable. However, when Zhao Gou changed the topic, everyone came to their senses. In the end, these people were only doing it for their own selfish desires. Wang Chongyang looked at Zhao Gou with a complicated expression. Emperor, could it be that you have lived in peace in the south for too long that you have forgotten some things in Bianjing? Not only do I have a second brother, but I also have a second sister. Zhao Gou's expression changed several times, as if he had remembered something important. Wang Chongyang's voice became low. In the 6th month of the 2nd year of Yuanfu, she returned to the Duan residence and was given the title of Lady Shun. Emperor Huizong ascended the throne and named her Empress, which was Empress Xiangong. She gave birth to Emperor Qinzong and Princess Chonghua. Unfortunately, she passed away when she was only 25 years old. However, in hindsight, it might have been a kind of luck in case she was caught by the Jins and humiliated in the Huani brothel during the Jinkong Rebellion. Zhao Gou's expression was ugly. Empress Xiangong was Emperor Huizong's first wife. His birth mother, Lady Wei, hadn't even met his father at that time. In addition, Empress Xiangong died early, and there were still the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th empresses. His birth mother, Lady Wei, could be counted as the 5th empress, and she was only posthumously named empress after he ascended the throne. Empress Xiangong's existence was so distant that he had almost forgotten about this relationship. However, he reacted quickly and quickly sneered, I thought that you were fighting against the genes in the Central Plains for the sake of the public. It turns out that you were only trying to save your sister's son to take the throne. Then, the reason for your rebellion today is clear. Wang Chongyang had been cultivating himself for many years, but when he heard this, he was so angry that he trembled. Bastard, one of them is your father, and the other is your brother. Shouldn't you be saving them? I know what you're thinking. Don't worry, so many years have passed, and they have long been tortured to death in the genes. You don't have to worry about your throne being unstable when they return. Father, brother, Zhao Gou's body trembled, and tears instantly filled his eyes. He wailed towards the north, but there was an inexplicable sense of relief in his heart. These years, Emperor Huizong and Emperor Qin had become a thorn in his heart. Those Jianghu ruffians and some ignorant officials would always use the excuse of pandering to Emperor Huizong and Emperor Qin, and it annoyed him greatly. Now that he had confirmed their current situation, he could finally sleep in peace. Who are you putting on this act for? Wang Chongyang looked at him with disdain. You can say that I am doing this for the sake of the public or for selfish reasons. I am here today for no other reason than to change the world, to return a new emperor to the Song dynasty, and to reclaim the shattered lands in the north. Zhao Gou wiped his tears and laughed coldly. Wang Chongfeng, I wonder who is the new emperor that you have in mind. In the past dynasties, people who had rebelled would use the name of the princes of the imperial family. If they succeeded, then so be it. But if they failed, even if those idle princes and princes were coerced, the emperor would never let them go. No emperor would be merciful to anyone who could threaten his imperial power. Wang Chongyang naturally saw through his intentions and scoffed coldly. You don't have to waste your time trying to figure it out. Anyone who becomes the emperor is better than someone like you who is cruel and tolerant. Dojo Monk took a step forward and stood between him and Zhao Gou. Brother Chongyang, even if there are many bad things about being an emperor, it has allowed the country to settle down again. Why do you have to stir up trouble again? Those who walk different paths cannot make plans together. Wang Chongyang shook his head. Brother Xiao Yuan, you and I have known each other for a while. I'm afraid that we will have to meet on the battlefield today. Please remember this book's domain name. Come, Wonderful Book House's mobile version. Come. Chapter 2012. Ba. The drunkard monk sighed. Since the time of Taizong, our family has received the favor of the emperor. Although I have become a monk now, I still have to repay the karma of the past. This time, I will protect the emperor. Wang Chongyang laughed loudly. We have unfinished karma from the wagered fight in the pavilion. Let's continue today. As he spoke, he stabbed. With his cultivation, he didn't need to use a sword against an enemy. But this time, his opponent was not an ordinary enemy. He didn't dare to be careless and pulled out his old sword. Protect the emperor. The guards on the side quickly pulled out their swords and stood guard around Zhao Gou. Even though the other's sword wasn't aimed at the emperor with his level of martial arts, who knew if he would change his move at the last moment? If that happened, would they have time to react? Li Yinshi's throat was a little dry. He usually thought that he was also a top expert in Jianghu. His identity as the one with the imperial armament made him look down on the people in Jianghu. But now, he only stood far away from the opponent's casual sword, and he already felt that it was difficult to block it. If the sword was aimed at him, would he be able to block it? He looked worriedly at the drunkard monk, unsure if he could block this attack. While they were both masters of the same level, the sword in Wang Chongyang's hand shone with cold light and was sharp. It was not an ordinary weapon. The drunkard monk was unarmed and would be at a disadvantage in this aspect. The drunkard monk slowly raised his hand. His sleeves suddenly bulged, and he quickly blocked the other's sword. Wang Chongyang laughed. Shaolin's world in the sleeve is only average among the 72 ultimate techniques. I didn't expect you to use it so well. Brother Chongyang, you must be joking. The Chuanjin sword technique is mediocre in the hands of the Chuanjin sect's disciples, but in your hands, it could be turned into magic. The drunkard monk answered as he blocked his attack. I was too naive. Wang Chongyang stopped smiling. His sword technique became even sharper. The others couldn't see his moves clearly. They could only faintly see a ball of silver light in his hand. Staring at the battle in the field, Zhao Go could not help but ask the people beside him, "Who do you think will win?" Li Yinshe replied, "Reporting to Sir, I am afraid Dojo Seng's internal energy has reached a level that can shake the ancients and dazzle the contemporaries. The Jiuyang Xingong is good at defense. Although Wang Chongyang's attack is swift and violent, Dojo Sung has been strictly guarding the 3 feet radius around him. If the stalemate continues and Wang Chongyang's strength is slightly depleted, Dashi will counterattack." Hearing this, Zhao Go's gloomy face finally showed a hint of a smile. Ding Jian also nodded secretly. Although Li Yinshe's words were meant to comfort the emperor, they also made some sense. The drunkard monk's kung fu was good at defense. If the difference in strength between the two sides was not big, he would have an advantage by using defense instead of offense. If Wang Chongyang did not have a follow-up move, he would probably lose this time. As soon as he thought of this, Wang Chongyang suddenly withdrew his sword and jumped out of the battle. He looked at the drunkard monk and said helplessly, "You're guarding like an old tortoise. It's really hard to find a place to attack." The drunkard monk smiled slightly. "We haven't seen each other for many years. Brother Chongyang, your swordsmanship has improved a lot. Don't say such polite words." Wang Chongyang huffed in annoyance. "Are you secretly proud that I can't break through your defense?" I don't dare." Although the drunkard monk spoke modestly, there was still some pride in his eyes. No matter what, Wang Chongyang was the #1 in the world. He did not have any desire to win or lose against others. It was still difficult for him to control himself against Wang Chongyang. Wang Chongyang naturally saw through his thoughts and was not angry. He smiled slightly and said, "Big monk, don't be too proud too early. The next move is the essence of my life's kung fu. It was originally used to deal with you old farts. It's a pity that it was broken by a young man last time." Huh? The drunkard monk was extremely shocked. What young man in this world can break your ultimate move? Wang Chongyang looked at him with a smile that was not a smile. "Big monk, are you smiling from the bottom of your heart? Don't worry, that person is an evildoer. Although he can break it, it doesn't mean that you can. Not to mention that I have learned from last time and have improved the formation. Even if I fight him again, he may not be able to break it." Thinking of the mysterious move of the young man in the Battle of Chongyang Palace, Wang Chongyang secretly sighed. If the other side had agreed to his 3 conditions, this operation would have been in the bag. Now he only had a 50-50 chance of winning. Wang Chongyang was not an ordinary person. He quickly put this regret to the back of his mind. His whole body moved in the Big Dipper formation and with a very mysterious pace. He circled around the drunkard monk. The people in the small courtyard only saw a blur in front of their eyes. They suddenly found that he had turned into 7 figures, faintly surrounding the drunkard monk. The Big Dipper formation. The drunkard monk's expression changed. Last time in the pavilion, he had gambled with Wang Chongyang. Both sides had only touched the surface, so he hadn't seen the other's special move. However, he had traveled the world, and his knowledge was extraordinary. In an instant, he saw the shadow of the Big Dipper formation of the Chuanjian 7, but that formation was used by 7 people working together. He didn't expect that Wang Chongyang would use it alone. The drunkard monk admired and respected him in his heart, but soon he didn't have the energy to admire him. Facing the attack of 7 great grandmasters of the same level at the same time, no matter how good his defense was, he instantly fell into a difficult situation. How is this possible? Not far away, Li Yinshe, Ding Jian, and the others opened their mouths wide. For a moment, it was as if their view of the world had been greatly subverted. The scene in front of them was really beyond their imagination. 7 Wang Chongyangs working together. Who in the world could be a match for them? The drunkard monk, who was in the center of the storm, had the deepest experience. Just a moment ago, Wang Chongyang had appeared at the positions of Migrez and Alioth and used the killing move of the Chuanjian sword technique. Just as he had blocked it, at the same time, Wang Chongyang had appeared at the positions of Fekta and Mizar and attacked him with the 3 flowers converging palm. The drunkard monk operated the 9 yang divine skill to the extreme to barely block the palm technique from both sides. However, the 2 figures of Wang Chongyang that appear behind him at the Alcade and Merak positions were something that he absolutely could not withstand. He could only hurriedly circulate his 9 yang genuine qi to protect his vital parts. Then he was instantly hit by Wang Chongyang's punch, palm, and finger. The drunkard monk vomited a mouthful of blood and opened his mouth. "Oh, Emma, and I pad me hum." The mantra of 6 runes was a sound wave technique, and sound could be transmitted in all directions. To a certain extent, it could also be considered a kind of indiscriminate killing. No matter how fast Wang Chongyang's 7 figures were, they couldn't escape the sound, so they could only retreat slightly to avoid the sharp edge. The drunkard monk took this opportunity to quickly operate his internal energy to heal his injuries. The punch and palm just now are fine, but the finger should be the single yang finger operated by the innate gang qi. When he was hit by the finger, he immediately felt half of his body go numb. It was also thanks to Wang Chongyang's 7 parts that the power of his attack was relatively weaker. Otherwise, if he had been hit by Wang Chongyang's single yang finger in his normal state, even if he had the protection of the 9 yang divine skill, his acupoints would probably have been instantly sealed, and the outcome of the battle would have been decided. When Wang Chongyang saw that the drunkard monk had recovered after vomiting blood, he couldn't help but click his tongue and wonder, the 9 yang divine skill is really unique in treating internal injuries. If other experts were hit by my 3 moves, even if they didn't die, they would be seriously injured. Big monk, you seem to be completely fine. As soon as he finished speaking, he once again used the Big Dipper formation to attack. In the past, he knew how strong the 9 yang divine skill's recovery ability was. If he delayed for a little longer, his opponent's internal injuries might be completely healed, and the advantage he had obtained with great difficulty would be wasted. The drunkard monk's expression was solemn. He used all the skills he had learned in his life to guard his body. If he really couldn't defend, he would use the mantra of 6 runes to retreat. In this way, he wouldn't be hit by his opponent after only a few moves like before. However, he knew that the mantra of 6 runes consumed a lot of internal energy, especially to make an expert like Wang Chongyang worry, so he naturally had to use all his strength. On the other hand, he had to deal with the attacks coming from all directions. Even with the amazing recovery ability of the 9 yang divine skill, he still felt that his internal energy was gradually being consumed. As the saying goes, if you defend for a long time, you will definitely lose. If this continued, he would most likely lose, unless Wang Chongyang used the Big Dipper formation all by himself. The drunkard monk suddenly felt a little regretful. If he had known this would happen, he would have gone to deal with Shi Patian and Huang Yaoshi himself. Although Shi Potion's internal energy was strong, his own strength was also internal energy. Huang Chang's 9E manual was extremely versatile. If it was him facing Wang Chongyang's Big Dipper formation, he definitely wouldn't be as helpless as he was. Of course, this didn't mean that the drunkard monk was weaker than Huang Chang. It should be known that when the 2 of them fought, the 9 yang divine skill innately restrained the cold internal energy, and the 9 white bone claw's evil energy was restrained to a certain extent by the Buddhist martial arts. Huang Chang, on the other hand, was at a disadvantage. It could only be said that even at the level of a great grandmaster, the principle of mutual promotion and restraint was unavoidable. Zhao Guo and the others at the side also saw that the drunkard monk was in a disadvantageous situation. They wanted to send their guards to help, but the difference between the 2 sides was just too big. In a fight between great grandmasters, before the others could even help, they were already seriously injured by the shockwaves of the scattered qi. Even Huang Yaoshi, who was at the level of one of the 5 ultimate masters, could only stand at the side and help. Although everyone with the imperial equipment was a master, none of them had reached the level of one of the 5 ultimate masters. Li Yinsher suddenly had an idea. He looked at the slightly open door and said to Zhao Guo, "Sir, since this is the territory of the Wudang Mountain, why don't we ask Master Zhang to help? As long as he is willing to help, everything will be settled." Zhao Go frowned slightly. This time, there was something strange about the Wu Dang clan. In his initial expectations, something must have happened to the Wu Dang clan, and the person in the wooden hut might not be Zhang Sanfeng. But now that things had come to this, they couldn't just give up. It would be good to let someone try. Seeing that he agreed, Li Yinshu used his internal energy and said to the hut, Master Zhang, now that the evildoers are trying to rebel, I hope that you will come out of seclusion and subdue the evil. He shouted 3 times, but there was still no response. Master Zhang, we have sent someone in. Li Yinshu frowned and signaled for the 2 of them to bring their imperial equipment in to investigate. Now that things had come to this, he couldn't care too much. Yugue Xiaosu, be careful. Li Yinshu reminded them carefully. Among the imperial equipment, Zhang Yugue and Bai Xiaosu were second only to him and Ding Dian. All these years, they had killed who knew how many Jianghu masters who dared to spy on the imperial house. The 2 of them looked out for each other. Even if it was a dangerous place, they would still have the ability to protect themselves. The 2 of them nodded. With their swords and sabers in hand, they walked in step by step with full vigilance. After the 2 of them passed through the screen, the people outside couldn't see their figures. Seeing that there was no movement after a long time, Li Yinshu couldn't help but ask, Yugue Xiaosu, what's going on inside? Bang! Bang! What answered him were 2 muffled sounds. 2 black shadows shot out and smashed into the ground. Everyone looked over and couldn't help but change their expressions. It turned out that the 2 guards with the imperial equipment were already dead. When I was writing the chapter names, I suddenly realized that I had already written 2,000 chapters. It really wasn't easy. Please remember the domain name of this book. Com. Wonderful Book House Mobile Version. Com. Chapter 2013. Yugue Shou Su. Li Yinshu exclaimed and hurriedly went over to investigate. Both of their eyes were wide open. How could they still be alive? The rest of the guards felt a chill in their hearts. It should be known that those who brought imperial weapons were all experts among experts, and these 2 were considered to be the cream of the crop, but they were actually killed in a single move. Just how terrifying was the martial arts of the person inside? However, they had already determined that the person inside was definitely not Zhang Sanfeng. How could a half-immortal like Zhang Sanfeng make such a killing move? Lighting subconsciously gripped the hilt of his sword tightly. Of course, he knew that the person inside was not his master. Previously, during the Mansion of Spirit surprise attack, his master was ambushed and his body was pierced by a sharp sword. Fortunately, he was strong enough to survive, but within the next 3 months, he would not be able to fight with anyone. Of course, with Zhang Sanfeng's cultivation, even if he was seriously injured, he would still be able to deal with the experts of the Jianghu. However, Song Qingshu knew that in the upcoming battle on Mount Wu Dang, grandmasters would be like dogs and great-grandmasters would be everywhere. Staying here was too risky, so he moved Zhang Sanfeng and the others to a nearby Taoist temple to recuperate. The reason why Lighting stayed here was because he wanted to cooperate with Song Qingshu to beat him at his own game, so that the people of Mansion of Spirits would not be able to see through him. Why is Qingshu not here yet? Lighting once again looked into the distance. His palms were already slightly sweaty. With the current situation, if he still did not come, the dust would probably settle. At this time, light footsteps suddenly sounded in the room. Everyone in the room looked over at the same time, only to see a gray-robed old man slowly walking out from inside. Someone noticed that this old man's fingers seemed to be incomplete and couldn't help but whisper, could it be the 9-fingered godly beggar, Hong Qigong? But Hong Qigong had always been loyal and courageous. How could he participate in such a rebellion? However, thinking that Huang Yaoshi, Wang Chongyang, and the others were also involved, even if there was Hong Qigong, it would not be surprising. It is not Hong Qigong. Li Yinshu shook his head, looked at the gray-robed man opposite him, and said in a deep voice, Murong Bo, as a loyal descendant, why are you also involved in the rebellion? Descendant of the loyal and virtuous? The person was naturally Murong Bo. His broken finger was injured by Song Qingshu's sword energy in the Jin Kingdom. Later, he kidnapped Huang Rong and Lin, In order to vent Huang Rong's anger, Song Qingshu seriously injured him. In the end, it was his son Murong Fu who exchanged the whereabouts of Murong Jingyue for his life. At that time, he had been seriously injured and would not be able to fight for a few years. However, this time, the Mansion of Spirits was very powerful and had healed his internal injuries. Now, he had recovered to his peak condition. Hearing the sarcasm in his tone, Li Yinshe shouted, "Your Murong family has received the favor of the emperor for generations. Back then, your ancestor Duke Yinzhao followed Taizu to conquer the world and was conferred the title of Hunan Prefecture Prince. Even in your generation, the imperial court has conferred nobility. You also have the real job of imperial city guard. Is this how you repay the imperial court?" At the same time, he felt strange. He had also heard of Gusum Murong's name and had met him once in the imperial city guard. He knew that his martial arts were unfathomable and not below the 5 absolutes. However, Zhang Yugue and Bai Xiaosu, 2 martial arts masters with weapons, although they were not as good as the 5 absolutes, they were not weak. How could they be killed without a sound? Do you think that a mere Hunan Prefecture Prince can bribe us? Murong Bo reached into his bosom and took out a square seal carved from black jade. On the jade seal was a vivid leopard. As the emperor, Zhao Go was naturally very familiar with this object. He couldn't help but be shocked. Jade seal. However, he immediately realized that the shape of this jade seal was very different from his own. For example, his jade seal was a 5-clawed golden dragon, but this jade seal was a leopard. Murong Bo flipped the seal over and revealed the seal. Everyone present was an expert, so even though they were separated by a distance, they could still see clearly. The seal was carved with 6 seal characters, Treasure of the Emperor of Great Yen. The jade seal was exquisitely carved, but the corners were damaged. It was obvious that it had been worn for many years and had gone through many disasters. Even though they couldn't tell if it was real or fake, they could tell that it was not an ordinary item. Murong Bo put his right hand into his bosom and took out an oilcloth bag. He opened the oilcloth and shook out a piece of yellow silk. Everyone fixed their eyes on it. On the yellow silk, there were 2 types of characters written with a red brush. The one on the right was crooked, but no one could read it. They thought it was Xianbei characters. The one on the left was written in Chinese characters. At the top was written, Genealogy of the Emperor of Great Yen. Raising his hand, it was written, Emperor of Civilization of the Emperor of Great Yen. Below it was written, Emperor of Lai Ancestor Jingzhao. Below it was written, Emperor of You. On the other line, it was written, Emperor of Wu Cheng of the Emperor of Great Yen. Above it was written, Emperor of Lai Ancestor Hui Min of the Emperor of Great Yen. Below it was written, Emperor of You of the Emperor of Great Yen. On the silk, it was written, Emperor of Middle Sect of Zhao Wu of the Emperor of Great Yen, Emperor of Zhao one of the Emperor of Great Yen, and so on. The names of the emperors were all missing strokes. In the 6th year of the Emperor of Great Yen, after the fall of Murong Chao of the Southern Yen, the descendants were all common people, no longer emperors or dukes. It was a long time ago, and the descendants multiplied. Li Yinshe and the others didn't have the mood to read it in detail. It was only until they saw the name Murong Fu that they saw the familiar name. Behind it were the descendants of the Southern Prefecture King. The last person in the genealogy list was written Murong Fu, and above it was Murong Bo. Country of Yen? Zhao Go suddenly had a feeling of absurdity. Country of Yen has fallen for hundreds of years, and you guys are still thinking of reviving it. Is it funny? Murong Bo put away the imperial seal and the genealogy list. We, the descendants of Murong family, do not dare to forget the responsibility on our shoulders. Back then, Emperor of Great Yen was able to revive it from the hands of Fu Jian. Although we, the descendants, are unworthy, why can't we do the same? No wonder that bastard Murong Fu would rebel in Sichuan. Zhao Go finally understood. When he thought of the fact that a third of the country was almost divided, he gritted his teeth in hatred. Fu didn't waste my years of nurturing. He could be considered the one who is the closest to reviving the country in history. Unfortunately, he still failed at the last moment. Murongbo's face instantly turned ruthless. Originally, I didn't have to be so anxious. But what happened in Sichuan ruined the reputation that we father and son worked so hard to build. I can only take the risk. Muddle-headed ruler, as long as you die, Song will be in chaos. At that time, it will be a good opportunity to revive it. Over the past several decades, other than engaging in crafty plots and conspiracies everywhere to stir up disputes among various countries, Murongbo had also changed his name to Yan Longyuan and hid in the Dangfeng area of Hunan province. He engaged in various big and small businesses in various places, borrowing this opportunity to increase his financial resources. As long as the Song state was in chaos, he could use this as capital to recruit soldiers and buy horses. How dare you? Li Yinshe was already furious because of Zhang Yugui and Bai Xiaosu. Now that he heard Murongbo insulting the emperor, how could he endure it? But even though he was furious, he didn't act rashly. This attack was 70% offensive and 30% defensive. Once the situation changed, he could immediately change his attack and defend. They say that those who bring imperial equipment are experts among experts. Today, I will have a taste of it. Murongbo laughed evilly. He hit the blade with his palm and used the power of shifting stars to move the blade to the side. Then he took the opportunity to get within 3 feet of his opponent. He quickly attacked the vital acupoints on Murongbo's chest. Li Yinshe was already prepared. Without any hesitation, he threw away his blade and used both hands to defend in front of him. He and Ding Dian were the ones with the highest martial arts among the imperial equipment. Naturally, they wouldn't be defeated so easily. On the side, Ding Dian saw that Murongbo's attacks were continuous like moving clouds and flowing water. He couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Gusu's Murong clan truly deserved their reputation. He clearly knew that Li Yinshe alone wouldn't be Murongbo's opponent. Thus, he sent another imperial equipment to help. Fighting 2 against 1, Li Yinshe finally managed to stabilize the situation. Ding Dian took the opportunity to say to Zhao Go, "Sir, the situation has changed. We should go down the mountain as soon as possible and meet up with the imperial guards." Zhao Go shook his head. "How can we leave now? The road down the mountain will be even more dangerous. It will be better to stay here. With 2 great grandmasters looking after us, it will be much safer than anywhere else." Ding Dian looked at the battle situation. Huang Chang was currently tied down by Shi Patian and Huang Yaoshi. Although he had the upper hand, it would still take a while for him to finish off his opponent. The drunkard monk's side was at a disadvantage. However, how could a fair battle between great grandmasters be decided so easily? Huang Chang's side should be the first to decide the winner. At that time, he would go over to help the drunkard monk. 2 against 1, Wang Chongyang would probably be defeated. Speaking of which, this place was relatively safer, so Ding Dian didn't try to persuade him any further. At this moment, Zhao Go couldn't help but curse. "We set a bait, and all kinds of monsters and snakes have come out. If you say you want to restore the later Zhou dynasty, we might actually be a bit afraid. The Yin kingdom that has been dead for hundreds of years wants to restore it. Are the brains of the Murong family people filled with shit? Who in this world still knows that the Yin kingdom has a broken jade seal and is dreaming of having hundreds of responses to one call?" Normally, Ding Dian would be surprised that the emperor would say such inappropriate words. However, he didn't have the time to think about it. Instead, he quickly scanned the battlefield, calculating the remaining forces on his side. The person in charge of the imperial armament was the elite of the elite, and there were only 6 of them. Zhang Yugui and Bai Xiaosu had just died in battle, and Li Yinshe had gone up against Murongbo. Now, the emperor only had himself and another substitute, who had replaced the person in charge of the imperial armament that Ling Hu Chong had left behind. His strength was the weakest of the 6. If another expert appeared at this time, it would be very difficult to protect the emperor. The only fortunate thing was that there were still dozens of armed guards, all of whom were experts carefully selected from the imperial army. Although they couldn't defeat a true grandmaster, Their advantage in numbers was enough to buy them some time. Once Huang Chang and the drunkard monk were free, there was nothing to worry about. Line up, protect the emperor. Ding Dian gathered the many guards to protect Zhao Go in the center. Huang Chang and the drunkard monk had intentionally lured the enemy away to prevent the aftermath of the battle from hurting the emperor. At this time, they had all moved to the bamboo forest outside the courtyard to fight. Only then did they have enough space in the courtyard. Next, Ding Dian sent people to help Li Yanshi. Although Murong Bo's martial arts were high, he was still not a grandmaster. Their side could completely rely on their advantage in numbers to surround and kill him. However, at this time, the sound of weapons falling to the ground suddenly came from all around them. Ding Dian looked around and saw that many of the guards had already fallen to the ground. Those who were still standing were swaying. Originally, they were all men who were full of vigor, but now it was as if a gust of wind would blow them over. Chapter 2014. Sorrowful Wind Softening. Ding Dian quickly covered his mouth and nose with his sleeves. Pass the antidote. As he spoke, he took out a porcelain bottle, sucked it, and passed it to the people around him. Sorrowful Wind Softening could be used against Wudong's sect and Beggar's sect. It worked every time, but against a country, it was a completely different concept. The Song dynasty in Western Xia had fought for 100 years, and the Imperial City Guards had fought against Class 1 Hall countless times. Naturally, they knew Class 1 Hall's poison very well, and they had even tried to get some antidotes. This time, they were escorting the Emperor, and their safety level was the highest. Besides, Zhao Go was luring the snake out of its hole, and he knew that the other party would use all sorts of methods to deal with him. That was why he ordered the Imperial City Guards to come up with all sorts of solutions to sudden situations. Forget Class 1 Hall's sorrowful wind softening. They even had an antidote for Mongolia's fragrant tendon-weakening powder. However, the production was limited, and it was impossible for everyone to have it. That was why so many guards fell. Isn't Western Xia in internal strife? Why are they involved? Zhao Go frowned. Clearly, the situation was out of his expectations. At that moment, two beautiful figures walked over slowly. Everyone looked over. Even if they were women, they had to be on their guard when they appeared here. There were two women, one big and one small. The older one was dressed like a young married woman and was very charming. The younger one was a young girl who was as beautiful as a fairy. Even though they knew that the two of them were probably assassins, the guards were still awed by their beauty. Madame Wang miss you. Ding Dian recognized them. They were Li Qingluo and Xiao Long Nu. One of them was a titled lady, and the other had tried to assassinate the emperor in the palace. He naturally recognized them. Zhao Go couldn't help but say, "Even you want to assassinate me?" Li Qingluo snorted coldly. Everyone has the right to kill an incompetent ruler. Zhao Go ignored her and just looked at Xiao Long Nu. She is from the Wang family, so it's not surprising that she is involved. But what about you? You are Yu Fei's daughter. Last time, I forgave you for the assassination, and I even announced to the world that I have vindicated your father. At the same time, I found your brothers who were scattered among the people and gave them titles. Is this how you repay me? Xiao Long Nu frowned slightly. She was not good with words and did not know how to refute. At this time, Li Qingluo spoke up for her. Don't confuse me with the Wang family. I didn't get involved for the Wang family, but to avenge little aunt and uncle. Auntie, Zhao Go frowned, confused. Ding Jian replied in a low voice. Madame Wang's aunt is General Yu's second wife. General Yu was attacked by Yang Yao's Kung Fu masters at Dongting Lake. Fortunately, Miss Li saved him. Li Qingluo continued. Back then, youngest uncle was loyal to the country, but he ended up like that. When youngest aunt was about to give birth, she was also hunted down. Do you think it's enough to deal with two scapegoats? Others may not know, but I've experienced what happened back then, and I'm very clear that you're the mastermind behind the scenes. Otherwise, how could a mere Qin Hui and Ma Qifeng touch youngest uncle when he was at his peak? We were born in Jianghu, and we only believe in the principle of blood for blood. Zhao Go scolded coldly. Untamed wolf pup. If I knew this would be the result, I would have eliminated the root of the problem. Now that the situation was getting more and more dangerous, he couldn't care less anymore, and couldn't help but feel exasperated. It's a pity that you won't have the chance. Li Qing Luo snorted coldly and used her water, treading subtle steps. Most of the guards had been hit by the sorrowful wind softener and had long lost the ability to fight. The remaining 20 to 30 guards could not stop her exquisite movements. Seeing that she had broken through in front of him in an instant, Ding Jian hurriedly stopped her. Shadowless fist against Baihong palm force, they were evenly matched. See, the table sister has made her move. Two swords suddenly appeared in Xiao Long Nu's hands. Although she did not know the magical Qigong like water, treading subtle steps, the ancient tomb sex Qigong was one of the best in Jianghu. In addition, her sword skills were too fast. The guards only saw a white shadow flash before their eyes, and many of their weapons fell to the ground. Looking at the red on their wrists, the guard were all shocked. How fast was this sword? Xiao Long Nu had a kind nature. Although she had come to kill Zhao Go, she did not want to harm the innocent, so she was very careful with her attacks. The tip of her sword only touched the guards lightly, and only made them lose the ability to fight back, but did not take their lives. The only remaining guard with the imperial weapon quickly drew his sword and went forward. His martial arts were much higher than the normal guards. If he encountered other top masters, even if he was no match for them, he would be able to hold on for a while. But Xiao Long Nu's sword was too fast. It was obvious that the sword came from the front, but in the next moment, the sword appeared behind him. It must be known that Nimixing, Xiaoxiang Zi, Yin Kashi, and even Jinluan Fuwang, these masters' martial arts were clearly higher than hers, but under her unpredictable pure heart of the Jade Maiden Sword technique, they were in a difficult situation. Although this guard with the imperial weapon's martial arts was strong, it was not higher than Jinluan Fuwang's. So in just a few moves, his body was hit multiple times, and he could no longer hold his opponent back. Breaking through the last line of defense, Xiao Long Nu's face was as cold as ice as she raised her sword and stabbed toward Zhao Go. At such a close distance, Zhao Go could clearly see her unparalleled beauty. It was said that the emperor had 3 palaces and 6 courtyards and 72 concubines. He counted all the concubines in the palace, and it was possible that only concubine Wu could compete with her in beauty. In addition, her clothes were as white as snow. Her entire person was like a fairy who had descended from the heavenly palace. But thinking that she wanted to take his life, she seemed more like a witch from the underworld. Even if I die under a peony flower and become a ghost, I will still be romantic. Zhao Go extinguished this thought as soon as it popped up in his mind. It had been so many years, and he was still thinking about such nonsense. Sir, at this time, a figure leapt in front of Zhao Go, using his body to block the sword for him. Yin Shi. Zhao Go's calm eyes could not help but be moved. He supported the loyal guard in front of him and said in a low voice, "Why did you do this? This subordinate's mission is to protect the Sir." Li Yanshi turned his head to look at Xiao Long Nu. "Lady you have been merciful with your sword. It is obvious that you're a kind-hearted person. I hope that on account of the Sir helping your father, you will not try to assassinate him again." Just now, when Xiao Long Nu realized that she had stabbed the wrong person, she had held back a little. So although Li Yinshi's injuries were not light, they were not fatal. He acutely sensed this, and took the opportunity to persuade her. Xiao Long Nu frowned slightly, and shook her head. "No, I want to kill him." These days, they had gone to search for the whereabouts of their father's sons. From the old nanny who took care of them, they found out about the tragic situation that year. Thinking about how their father was killed unjustly by Zhao Go, even though he was loyal to the country. Their mother, who had just given birth, had to bring them along to face the endless pursuit, and how many other Yu clan members had sacrificed themselves to protect their brother's safety. Some relatives were even killed to protect them. How could they give up on pursuing the matter just because they were forced to do so? Li Yanshi covered his wound and said in a low voice, "If that's the case, you will have to step over my dead body." You. Xiao Long Nu was a little angry, but with Li Yinshe blocking Zhao Go with his body, it was hard for her to find an opportunity. Soft-hearted, if you can't do it, then let me do it. A gray shadow flashed, and Murong Bo threw a punch. Li Yinshe was shocked. Facing Xiao Long knew he could bully her, but facing Murong Bo, if he didn't retaliate, he would probably lose his life immediately. How could he not be anxious? The person with the Imperial equipment who had cooperated with him to deal with Murong Bo hurriedly flew over to help. Because he didn't stop the opponent, something happened to the Emperor. That was a disaster that could lead to the extermination of the entire clan. How could he not be anxious? He attacked Murong Bo's back with all his might, trying to besiege Wei to save Zhao, who knew that Murong Bo's punch was just a feint. He suddenly retreated and crashed into the chest of the person with the Imperial equipment. Then, he used his joined finger and stabbed the other party's heart. Originally, although his martial arts were higher than the other parties, it would still take some effort to deal with him. However, he had purposely lured the other party to use all his strength to save Zhao Go, which was why he was able to deal with the other party easily. Bastard! Li Yinshe saw that the light in his colleague's eyes gradually dimmed. He was shocked and angry at the same time. He hurriedly pounced towards Murong Bo to see if he could save his colleague. Murong Bo laughed out loud and threw the corpse of the Imperial equipment to the side. Then, he calmly dealt with the heavily injured Li Yinshe. His martial arts were originally not as good as his. Now that he was injured and fighting with all his might, it wouldn't be long before he could take his life. Cousin, what are you hesitating for? Ding Dian wanted to rush over to help, but Li Qingluo stubbornly held him back. At the same time, she reminded Xiao Long Nu nodded her head slightly. Then, a cold light flashed in her hand, and her sword stabbed toward Zhao Go. At this moment, a yellow ribbon suddenly flew over from the side and swept her long sword to the side. To be able to use a soft ribbon to sweep her sword away, the person's martial arts were not bad. However, Xiao Longnu's expression did not change at all. Since there were weapons everywhere on the ground, she directly picked up a sword from the ground and held it in her hand. She calmly looked at the yellow-clothed girl in front of her. The two of them were both graceful and beautiful. What was even more coincidental was that the two girls' faces were also pale, lacking a bit of color compared to normal people. In the eyes of others, the two girls did not seem like opponents when they stood together. Instead, their temperaments were so similar that they seemed more like sisters. Ying Luo, recognizing the identity of the person, Zhao Go was slightly excited. He subconsciously looked to the side, but did not see the figure of the person he had imagined. He could not help but frown and say, "Why did you come back alone? Where is King Qi?" The yellow-clothed girl casually answered, "He is behind me. He will be here soon." Of course, she did not dare to say that she had come back alone. Firstly, she was afraid that the people on her side would lose confidence. Secondly, she wanted to temporarily use the name of Song Qingshu to intimidate the people on the other side. Qingshu, Xiao Long naturally knew who the King Qi they spoke of was. She could not help but be a little dazed. The yellow-clothed girl would not let go of such a good opportunity. Her figure flashed, and she used the 9-yin white bone claw to attack within 3 feet of her. Although the opponent's sword skills were high, at such a close distance, the opponent's sword skills were definitely not as powerful as her 9-yin white bone claw. Xiao Longnu's reaction was also very fast. Her entire body leaned backwards. Her body was like a soft willow branch, dodging the hand that was grabbing toward her chest. At the same time she flipped backwards, the tip of her foot kicked the other's wrist, avoiding the opponent's hidden attack. Taking the opportunity to pull away, the two swords in Xiao Longnu's hands instantly counterattacked. The yellow-clothed girl secretly sighed in pity. She hurriedly used the exquisite martial arts of the 9-yin manual to deal with the opponent's elusive sword skills. The moves that the two girls used were both very fast and ruthless. However, the two girls' figures were very graceful, as if they were floating in the air. Although they were engaged in the most dangerous competition, in the eyes of the bystanders, it was as if two fairies were dancing together. Ding Dian, who was at the side, was not in the mood to appreciate this rare, beautiful scene. From the corner of his eyes, he had already noticed that the nearby Li Yinshe was surrounded by danger. It was very clear that the injured Li Yinshe was not Morombo's opponent. Before long, he would probably lose his life on the spot. Just as he was thinking of finding an opportunity to help him, a figure suddenly appeared behind him, and a fist fiercely landed on his back. First, set a small goal. For example, remember in 1 second, Booksellers Mobile. Chapter 2015. Ding Dian spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Bodyguard Ding. The rest of the guards cried out in alarm. Many of them rushed over to help. Li Qingluo frowned and didn't attack again. Instead, she looked at the figure in front of her warily. Attacking someone from behind is despicable. Winner takes all. What does a woman like you know? The person laughed coldly. Obviously, he didn't take her words to heart. At the same time, he jumped out of the battle circle and didn't bother with the guards. Zhao Guicheng, it's you. Zhao Go recognized the person and couldn't help but be shocked and angry. The person was Prince Yi, who was originally guarding the Suzhou corridor. Hearing this, he couldn't help but smile. Greetings, Your Highness. Zhao Go said hatefully. I wanted to lure Jia Sherdao out, but I didn't expect to lure out 2 hungry wolves. Prince Yi sighed. Your Highness has given us such a good opportunity. If I don't do something, I'll be letting down Your Highness' good intentions. Zhao Go's eyes were filled with anger. I've treated you well. I've promoted you from an ordinary member of the royal family to Prince Yi. Why are you rebelling against me? Treated me well? Prince Yi seemed to have been poked at a sore spot. He said hatefully, back then, Your Highness had no heirs. The imperial court chose from all the members of the royal family. Zhao Gua and I were sent to the capital together. Whether it was in terms of civil and military strategy or intelligence, I was 100 times better than Zhao Guihe. Why did you choose Zhao Guihe, who was inferior to me in every aspect, to be the crown prince and let me be a prince? I'm not convinced. Since you won't give it to me, then I'll take it from you myself. You're really treating me with kindness, Zhao Go said angrily. If it weren't for my care, you would still be an idle member of the royal family. Now that I've given you glory and riches, you're still not satisfied. Doesn't Your Highness know that it's better not to give people hope in the first place than to take it away with your own hands? Prince Yi's expression was ferocious, especially when he thought of how Zhao Guihe had been above him all these years. He felt tormented. Zhao Go sighed. Do you know why I chose Guihe to be the crown prince in the end? Prince Yi's pupil shrank. Why? This was something he had never been able to understand. Ever since he had been chosen to be sent to the capital, he had done well in everything. But in the end, the position of crown prince had still fallen to someone else. Zhao Go looked deeply at him and then said, while you are better than Guihe in every way, you are not as good as him in one aspect. How am I not as good as him? Prince Yi immediately asked, his heart full of dissatisfaction. Zhao Go looked in the direction of Lin and let out a long sigh. Although Guihe, he is not as good as you in many areas. At least he is more generous than you, more tolerant than you. Looking at it today, Zhen's initial judgment was indeed correct. Generous? Prince Yi snorted coldly. That's just an excuse to fool the common people. I only believe that the winner takes all. Unwilling to waste any more words with the other party, Zhang Xian charged straight at him. Along the way, there were guards who tried to stop him, but he ended their lives with a single palm strike. All the guards were shocked, thinking that a prince who had lived a comfortable life actually had such a high level of martial arts. It seemed that he had been harboring disloyalty for a long time. Seeing that Prince Yi was about to reach Zhao Go, suddenly a sword stabbed over from the side. The timing of this stab was very good. Prince Yi did not want to kill Zhao Go and also be stabbed to death with a sword. His life was very precious. Dodging to the side, he finally saw the appearance of the attacker clearly. He could not help but say angrily, "In lighting, don't forget that the lives of the people of Wudong sect are still in my hands." In lighting snorted coldly. Since the establishment of our Wudong sect, we have always been loyal and righteous. How can we be threatened by you? Seeing that Song Qing-shu had not arrived yet, he could only stop Princey first. But now that Zhao Go was dead, everything was settled. You don't care about the lives of the brothers of Wudong's sect. Don't tell me you don't care about your pregnant wife? Prince Yi was furious. Usually, he did not care about Yin Lighting, but now that everyone in the small courtyard was busy, Yin Lighting's appearance had actually changed the situation of the battle. Yin Lighting's expression turned solemn. If the country does not exist, how can the family rely on them? Bu Hui should also agree with my actions. Actually, young Bu Hui and the rest had already been arranged to a safe place. Why would he be threatened? It was just that he did not want to expose himself for the time being, so he feigned civility with him. Bastard, you will implicate the whole of Wudong's sect and die without a burial place. Prince Yi said exasperatedly. At this time, if he did not take down Zhao Go, it would be inevitable that something unexpected would happen. So he did not waste his breath and directly attacked. Seeing that he was coming at him fiercely, Yin Lighting immediately concentrated and used a set of Taiji swordplay at will, guarding the door tightly. Although Prince Yi's martial arts were higher than Yin Lighting's, the Taiji swordplay was created by Zhang Sanfeng in his later years after Taiji Fist. It was truly the pinnacle of swordplay in recent times. Once Yin Lighting's internal energy was activated, it was endless. Although he could not hurt his opponent, as long as he could protect himself, it was absolutely flawless. Prince Yi was shocked and angry, but it was not easy to break through his defense. Seeing Li Qingluo standing at the side, he shouted, "Widow Hua, what are you waiting for?" Li Qingluo's whole body trembled. She looked at him deeply. "So you are old Saber Honcho?" Prince Yi said angrily. "Why do you care who I am? Don't you want to take revenge?" Li Qingluo snorted and then attacked Zhao Go. Those ordinary guards could not block her wave-like, subtle steps. The yellow-robed girl at the side had been paying attention to the situation. Seeing that the situation was not right, she hurried over to block her. Xiaolong Nu chased over, but was also blocked by her. In an instant, it became the yellow-robed girl against the two of them. Their martial arts were not below hers. Very soon, the yellow-robed girl was surrounded by danger. Li Qingluo was already struggling to deal with Xiaolong Nu's elusive pure heart of jade, maiden swordsmanship. Now that Li Qingluo was added to the mix, she quickly had a few wounds on her body. If Xiaolong Nu had not unintentionally tried to kill her, she would have died long ago. The yellow-robed girl knew that she could not withstand more than a few moves like this. Suddenly, she had an idea. She lowered her voice and said, "Are you doing this to Brother Song? Brother Song?" Hearing her intimate tone, the two girls indeed slowed down their attacks. Li Qingluo shouted, "What is your relationship with Song Qing-shu?" The yellow-robed girl had originally just wanted to give it a try. When Xiaolong Nu had entered the palace to assassinate Xiaolong Nu, it was Song Qing-shu who had risked his life to protect her. Based on her understanding of Song Qing-shu, she did not believe that the two of them had no relationship. Now that she saw the situation, she immediately understood. She answered ambiguously, "The relationship between you and him is the same as my relationship with him." "Little wench, you dare to lie to me?" Li Qingluo was a bit angry, but her attacks slowed down a bit. The yellow-robed girl understood Song Qing-shu, and they understood his personality even more. The yellow-robed girl in front of them was a heavenly beauty, and it was obvious that she knew Song Qing-shu. If something really happened between the two of them and they hurt her, how would they explain to that bastard in the future? Although Xiaolong Nu did not say anything, her lightning-fast pure heart of jade, maiden swordsmanship, could not help but slow down a bit. Women are just unreliable. A cold snort came from not far away. Murongbo passed by them. With his cultivation, how could he not see that Li Qingluo and Xiaolong Nu were going easy on him? However, the current situation was chaotic. He did not have a mind to look into the reason. He directly attacked Zhao Go. The yellow-robed girl was shocked. She hurriedly looked at Li Yanshi, who was originally fighting Murongbo. She discovered that he was lying in a pool of blood. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Li Yincher's martial arts were originally not as good as Muronbo's. Adding on the fact that he had suffered a serious sword wound, the gap was even greater. He was going all out. The yellow-robed girl wanted to save him. However, she was currently fighting with two people. How could she find the time to help? The remaining guards beside Zhao Go hurriedly blocked in front of him. However, Muronbo's wish that he had held back for decades was about to be fulfilled. Naturally, he did not show any mercy when he attacked. Very quickly, he killed the remaining guards and grabbed Zhao Go's neck. With his martial arts, he only needed to exert a little force, and Zhao Go would definitely die. At this moment, Muronbo was a little hesitant. In the beginning, when he was invited by the Mansion of Spirits, he naturally wanted to kill Zhao Go. When the world was in chaos, their Murong family would take the opportunity to rise up. However, looking at the current situation, if Zhao Go died, it would most likely be Prince Yi who would ascend to the throne. The imperial court would probably be stabilized very soon. This might not be in line with his own interests. Muronbo and his son had always been proud of the Yin Kingdom's royal bloodline. They usually disdained the culture of the Han people. Whenever they had time, they would at most spend their energy on martial arts secret manuals. How would they have the time to read the history books of the Han people? If he had read the story of Jing Ke's assassination of the Qin dynasty, he would definitely know that at that time, Jing Ke had originally restrained Zheng, but when he was about to kill him, he suddenly had a moment of hesitation. He thought that wouldn't it be better to force Zheng to hand over the land that he had annexed all those years ago? It was this moment of hesitation that allowed Zheng to find a chance to break free from his control. In the end, all his efforts were in vain. At this moment, he also made the same mistake. He saw that Zhao Go did not reveal any expression of panic. Instead, the corner of his mouth revealed a trace of a strange smile. Muronbo's heart froze. Before he could react, he felt an incomparable piercing pain in his eyes. Then, everything in front of him turned blood red, and he could not see anything. Ah! Muronbo screamed as he covered his bleeding eyes. He was in so much pain that he rolled on the ground. Looking at the two embroidery needles stuck in his eyes, everyone felt that their own eyes were also hurting. Who exactly did this? At this moment, everyone was very confused. At this moment, a remnant shadow beside Muronbo dashed directly into the bamboo forest. It moved like lightning. It was even faster than Li Qingluo's water-treading subtle steps and Xiao Long Nu's Qinggong. Just now, that was Zhao Go. Li Qingluo was instantly bewildered. Even the yellow-robed girl was shocked. She never knew that an official could actually know martial arts. With such an unforeseen event, how could they continue fighting? They very tacitly stopped and hurriedly chased after Zhao Go. Prince Yi and Yin Lighting, who were at the side, also had a face of disbelief. They also followed out at the same time. In the bamboo forest, a few grandmasters were fighting. The scattered forces had already destroyed the entire bamboo forest. The others wanted to go forward and help, but they could not get close at all. Zhao Go turned into a ray of yellow light and suddenly appeared at Shi Potion's side from strange angle. Shi Potion was currently concentrating on dealing with Huang Chang's power. How would he know that there was another person beside him? A cold light appeared in Zhao Go's hand. Only a few people at the scene could clearly see that it was only a needle in his hand. A needle that was no different from an embroidery needle, but this kind of embroidery needle, which would normally be insignificant to an ordinary person, was pierced into Shi Potion's body by Zhao Go. Shi Potion let out an earth-shattering scream. His whole body was like a deflated balloon. Immediately, blood spurted out crazily. As if he was hit by a heavy hammer, he instantly crashed into a big tree at the side, breaking it in half. As for Shi Potion himself, he tried to get up from the ground several times. But after trying a few times, he finally helplessly lay on the ground. Huang Chang seemed to have expected this. Without any hesitation, he directly punched Huang Yaoshi's chest with the great demon subduing fist. Huang Yaoshi was originally relying on Shi Potion to block the front. Now that there was only one person left, coupled with the fact that he was deeply shocked, how could he defend? He was hit by the fist and his whole body flew out like a broken sandbag. Huang Chang did not look at him again. In an instant, he appeared on the other side of the battlefield, his palms silently pressed towards Wang Chongyang's back. First, set a small goal. For example, remember in 1 second, Booksellers Mobile. Chapter 2016. Wang Chongyang was a great grandmaster after all. He had already noticed the abnormality on the other side. Also, Zhao Guo's sneak attack on Shirpatian gave him some time to react. At this time, when Huang Chang attacked, he was able to use the Big Dipper stance and narrowly avoid the attack. Normally, the two great grandmasters wouldn't have put down their pride to bully Wang Chongyang with numbers. However, this was a matter of national importance, and they weren't pedantic people. Naturally, they didn't have any misgivings in this regard. Without any hesitation, the two of them attacked Wang Chongyang from both sides. At this moment, Wang Chongyang finally experienced the pain Song Qingshu had suffered. The inner energy of the two people opposite him. One of them was extremely yin and gentle, while the other was extremely yang. They took turns to invade his meridians, numbing his hands and feet. The Big Dipper formation was no longer as natural as it used to be. The two great grandmasters took advantage of the situation to attack wildly. Wang Chongyang immediately fell into a disadvantageous position. If it weren't for his Big Dipper formation, he would have been seriously injured in a short time. Even so, he could only barely hold on. As time went on, he was doomed to lose. In fact, if Wang Chongyang had fought against the other two grandmasters, he might not have been able to win by relying on the magical Big Dipper formation, but it wouldn't have been too difficult for him to secure a draw. However, Huang Chang and the drunken monk's martial arts complemented each other perfectly, and the effect of 1 + 1 was greater than 2. On the other side, Zhao Guo did not intervene in the battle between the three great grandmasters. Instead, he walked towards Prince Yi step by step. Don't come over. King Yi himself was a martial arts master, and he could see that although Zhao Guo's martial arts were high, he was not at the level of a great grandmaster. But what happened in the blink of an eye was too shocking. He witnessed with his own eyes how Zhao Guo crippled two martial arts masters, Murong Bo and Shirpatian. His entire body was already shrouded in fear. Zhao Guo's tone had a hint of sarcasm. Didn't you want to kill me just now? Why aren't you coming? Prince Yi's courage was taken away. His voice trembled. How do you know martial arts? Zhao Guo said indifferently. You are just a prince. If you can learn such high-level martial arts, how can I, the emperor, not know martial arts? Prince Yi suddenly understood. As a prince, how could the resources he could use be compared with the emperor? Even he could collect a large number of martial arts manuals and treasures to increase his power. The emperor obviously had an advantage in this aspect, but the emperor had really put in a lot of effort to hide his martial arts all these years. Thinking back to the spy's report, when they went up Mount Wudong, Zhao Guo would be out of breath after walking for a short while and needed to rest. So it was purposely to create a false impression for others. No wonder when he saw the crowned prince, he was displeased and did not need to rest at all. Since the assassination began, Zhao Guo's expression had been relatively calm. Before, they had thought that he was putting on an act, but now it seemed that he had been hiding his trump card. Although the soldier who had been injured by Xiao Longnu had lost his ability to fight, he was still conscious. Seeing the sudden change in the situation, not only did he not rejoice, but his heart was filled with sorrow. Since the emperor's martial arts were so high, why didn't he make a move at the beginning? Why did he have to wait until the guards were all dead and injured before he made a move? Seeing Li Yanshi and Ding Dian lying in a pool of blood, as well as the dead and injured bodyguards, for the first time, he began to doubt the creed he had been following all these years. Zhao Guo naturally did not have the time to care about the thoughts of a bodyguard. At this moment, he was already close enough to Prince Yi, close enough for him to make his move. Trade or die. Suddenly, Prince Yi's face changed. He changed his previous look of fear and waved his palm to block. Since he had organized such a rebellion, how could he be so easily shaken? His previous disguise was just to catch them off guard and try to reverse the situation. Unfortunately, the older, the wiser. Zhao Go laughed coldly. He had already guessed his opponent's intention. The attack just now was just a feint. His figure flashed, and he appeared behind Prince Yi. In an instant, he attacked several times. His moves were similar to Xiao Longnu's. His moves were as fast as lightning, making it hard for people's eyes to react. However, one was like a fairy descending from heaven, while the other was like a ghost. Prince Yi could successfully ambush Ding Dian, who had mastered the god-reflecting scripture, and suppressing lighting, who was proficient in the Tai Chi sword. His martial arts skills were top-notch in Jianghu. However, his opponent's martial arts skills were too strange. In just a few moves, he was injured several times. His heart grew colder and colder. He knew that after a few moves, his blood would be splattered on the spot. "Faceless man, why aren't you making your move?" Prince Yi suddenly shouted in shock and fear. Zhao Go was startled and quickly gave up on attacking. He focused his mind and calmed his chi to guard against a possible attack. In the distance, the battle between the three grandmasters was coming to an end. Although Wang Chongyang's Big Dipper formation was miraculous, it was still attacked by the 9 Yin and 9 Yang genuine Qi. It was inevitable that his internal breath would be a little difficult to operate. Normally, this little bit of difficulty would not affect anything. However, he was facing two great grandmasters today. He would not let go of even a fleeting opportunity. The 9 Yin manual that Huang Chang studied could be said to be the culmination of all the techniques in the world. He quickly saw that the key to Wang Chongyang's formation was the position of the North Star. As long as he occupied the position of the North Star, he could control the Big Dipper formation as the master. However, the previous few attacks were all deftly resolved by Wang Chongyang. It made sense. As a great grandmaster, he naturally knew where the weakness of his formation was and had already made various precautions. Not everyone was like Song Qing-shu, who could break through his layers of defense and appear at the position of the Big Dipper formation's eye out of thin air. Therefore, Huang Chang's several attacks were all in vain. Unfortunately, Wang Chongyang's body was slightly stagnated by the hot and cold qi. Huang Chang, who had been looking for an opportunity, finally found it. He seized the fleeting opportunity and occupied the position of the formations, before Wang Chongyang returned to the position of the North Star. Since the formations was occupied, the formation was naturally broken. The 7 figures of Wang Chongyang immediately returned to 1. Huang Chang did not waste this opportunity and directly attacked him with the demon's subduing fist. Wang Chongyang knew that it was too late to dodge, so he could only use the Xiantian skill to block it. On the other side, the drunken monk instantly understood Huang Chang's plan. Wang Chongyang's title of the world's #1 was not undeserved. He had endless magical and exquisite moves. Now it was 2 against 1. If they fought normally, it would be difficult to defeat the opponent in a short time, although they had the advantage. Instead, it would be better not to compete in moves and only compete in internal strength. No matter how powerful Wang Chongyang's Xiantian skill was, how could he be a match for 2 great grandmasters? Therefore, the drunken monk also attacked with his palm. He gave up on all kinds of fancy moves and only used simple and heavy moves, making it impossible to dodge. Wang Chongyang instantly understood the two's plan. However, an overt plot was like this. Even if you saw through it, you could not avoid it. You could only rely on brute force to resolve it. Feeling helpless, Wang Chongyang could only use his single yang finger to poke the wine-fighting monk's palm. The 3 of them, who had been fighting fiercely, suddenly fell in his silence. Wang Chongyang was holding a great grandmaster in one hand, and his whole body was steaming. Obviously, he had used the Xiantian skill to the extreme. At this time, he secretly complained. It was a pity that he did not know martial arts such as the Heaven and Earth Great Shift of the Ming Dynasty or the Big Dipper of the Morong family. Otherwise, in this situation, he could borrow strength to fight strength and let Huang Chang and the drunken monk fight. Now, he could only use his internal strength to resist the internal strength of 2 great grandmasters. Obviously, he was going to lose. However, Wang Chongyang had always been a proud and arrogant person. It was impossible for him to admit defeat at this time. Moreover, the three of them had already used their internal strength. Even if he wanted to admit defeat, there was no way. In the martial arts world, the internal strength competition was the most dangerous. Before the winner was completely determined, no one dared to withdraw their internal strength. Otherwise, if the opponent took the opportunity to counterattack, they would be seriously injured even if they did not die. After understanding all this, a trace of determination flashed in Wang Chongyang's eyes. Even if he died here today, he would still drag one person down with him. The drunken monk suddenly called out the name of Buddha. "Brother Chongyang, now that things have come to this, why are you still so persistent? Why don't you make a vow that you will never return to the Central Plains, and we will stop here? I am willing to be your guarantor in front of the government." Wang Chongyang laughed. "Chongyang has never been weaker than anyone in my life. It is not that easy for you to defeat me." Wang Chong nodded. "Yes, one-on-one. None of us is sure to win against you. But now that the two of us have joined forces, the result has been decided." At the same time, he secretly sighed that the Xiantian skill was really a great skill in the world. How could it last so long under the attack of the two of them? Seeing that Wang Chongyang still wanted to refute, the drunken monk said, "Brother Chongyang, now that both of your hands are tied up by us, we still have one free hand. Although we can't use too much internal strength, if we poke you now, you won't be able to survive." Wang Chongyang frowned, but he also understood that what the drunken monk said was the truth. He had used up all his energy to resist the 9 Yin genuine Qi and the 9 Yang divine skill. He had no spare energy to defend against the attacks of the other two hands. The drunken monk continued, "Since you have no objections, I will withdraw my internal strength first. Then you and Brother Huang can stop." Although Wang Chongyang and Huang Chong were old acquaintances, the three of them knew that Huang Chong pursued the way of nature. He believed that the world was heartless and treated all things as dogs. As long as he could achieve his goal, he didn't care about worldly morality. The drunken monk couldn't guarantee that he wouldn't take the opportunity to seriously injure Wang Chongyang for the sake of the royal family's stability. So, he could only stop first and then be a witness for the two of them. At that time, even if something happened, he could intervene in time to stop it. On the other side, Huang Chong frowned and hurriedly tried to dissuade Big Monk. It had to be known that the internal strength of the three of them was surging, and they had entered an extremely dangerous state. Moreover, once Wang Chongyang took the opportunity to attack, the drunken monk would definitely be seriously injured. Now that the two of them had joined forces, they could easily win. Even if they had to pay a price in the end, why take the risk? The drunken monk shook his head. "Brother Chongyang and I are old friends. I believe that with Brother Chongyang's character, you won't take the opportunity to harm me." Wang Chongyang was touched, but he smiled and said, "That's not necessarily true." The drunken monk smiled slightly and began to withdraw a portion of his internal strength from his palm. Wang Chongyang was competing with him in internal strength and immediately noticed the change. He frowned and finally withdrew a portion of his internal strength. "Excellent, excellent." The drunken monk's gaze became softer and softer. Then, he took the initiative to withdraw a portion of his internal strength. Wang Chongyang returned the favor and also withdrew a portion of his internal strength. At this speed, he would probably be able to separate from the drunken monk in a few breaths' time. At this moment, a shrill cry suddenly rang out. "Faceless man, why aren't you making a move?" As soon as the words were spoken, a masked man suddenly walked out of the small house in the courtyard. The surrounding people instantly felt a sense of absurdity. His speed was clearly not as fast as Zhao Gou's, but it was as if he had already appeared beside the three grandmasters in a stride. His palm lightly hit the Shanzhong acupoint on the drunken monk's chest. Although the three grandmasters were competing in a dangerous internal strength contest, Huang Chong and the drunken monk could still move one hand. Even though most of their internal strength was competing with Wang Chongyang, with their cultivation and eyesight, even if an expert of the five uniques came over, he might not be able to gain the upper hand. Seeing the opponent's attack, the drunken monk's expression changed drastically. He leaned his body slightly and waved his palm forward at the same time. It seemed ordinary, but this sideways body wave contained the essence of his entire life's martial arts. It could be said that this palm could block all attacks in the world, and the sideways body wave neutralized the opponent's follow-up attack. However, the person's palm that seemed gentler than a lover's caress ignored the drunken monk's defense and directly hit the Shanzhong acupoint on the drunken monk's chest. Please remember this book's original domain name. Com. Wonderful Book House mobile version website. Com. Chapter 2017. The drunkard monk's face, which was usually glowing with health, was now pale. At the same time, his monk's robe swelled up, and he seemed to have doubled in size. He quickly retreated, and with every step he took, his monk's robe became smaller. After retreating 10 steps, his monk's robe returned to normal. No, it was even smaller than before. A few sharp-eyed people could clearly see that it wasn't that the monk's robe had become smaller, but that the tall and sturdy drunkard monk had become somewhat thin and stooped. The masked man didn't chase after the drunkard monk. Instead, he attacked Wang Chongyang's back with his palm. When Wang Chongyang saw the sudden change, he subconsciously withdrew some of his inner strength so that the drunkard monk would have the strength to deal with the sneak attacker. However, the sudden withdrawal of inner strength, coupled with the fact that the drunkard monk didn't have time to withdraw his inner strength, caused Wang Chongyang's blood to boil. Of course, with his great grandmaster cultivation, this kind of internal injury could be temporarily suppressed in a few breaths. Unfortunately, the masked man didn't give him the time. Taking advantage of the fact that half of Wang Chongyang's body was numb and he couldn't resist, the masked man pressed his palm on Wang Chongyang's back. Wang Chongyang sighed to himself, "My life is over." Just now, he had clearly seen that the masked man had also reached the great grandmaster realm. Normally, if he was hit in the back with a palm, he would be seriously injured even if he didn't die, let alone in his current state. However, he quickly revealed a shocked expression. He wasn't injured. The opponent's vast, ocean-like inner chi seemed to be using his body as a ferry, flowing through his meridians to his right palm. He was a brilliant person, so he immediately understood the opponent's intention. The opponent wanted to take this opportunity to seriously injure Huang Chong, who was competing with him in inner strength. Huang Chong was originally evenly matched with his inner strength. Now that his inner strength had suddenly doubled, how could he withstand it? Wang Chongyang didn't want the masked man to succeed, but he knew that if he withdrew his palm, the surging inner strength in his body would have nowhere to vent. It would instantly explode inside his body, and he would immediately die. He wouldn't even have time to say his last words. Survival was a human instinct. Even at the great grandmaster realm, it was difficult to avoid it. Of course, if he had enough time to think, he might have made the choice to sacrifice himself. However, in such a short time, how could he have time to think clearly? What the other party wanted was this moment of hesitation. In that moment of hesitation, the incomparably turbulent true chi had already surged from his palm towards Huang Chong. When Huang Chong saw the drunkard monk being ambushed, he reacted quickly enough. He knew that it was impossible for him to escape unscathed, so he decided to interrupt the battle of internal energy, even if he had to suffer internal injuries. Wang Chongyang was busy fighting the masked man and would not ambush him at this time. This way, even if Huang Chong suffered the backlash of internal energy, it would still be bearable. He would take advantage of the time when the masked man attacked Wang Chongyang to regain his freedom. That way, he would still have the strength to fight the masked man. Unfortunately, as soon as he withdrew his internal energy, the power in Wang Chongyang's palm suddenly doubled. Huang Chong spat out a mouthful of blood, and his whole body retreated like a broken sandbag. His first thought was that Wang Chongyang had taken the opportunity to attack him, but the next moment he realized that the internal energy that attacked him was completely different from Wang Chongyang's Xiantian skill. Obviously, it was the masked man who attacked him. It turned out that his opponent did not injure Wang Chongyang as he had imagined, but chose to deal with him first. What a deep plan! In that instant, Huang Chong not only suffered the backlash of his own internal energy, but also the internal energy of Wang Chongyang and the mysterious man. It was the equivalent of a person taking the full brunt of the attack. In addition to his old age, he had already lost his vitality. The only thing he could do now was to take a few more breaths. The opponent's timing was so precise that even his reaction after the attack was fully taken advantage of. If it was not planned from the beginning, he would not have believed it. The masked man did not stop after injuring two grandmasters. His palm continued to press on Wang Chongyang's back, and his internal energy was about to shatter Wang Chongyang's meridians. However, when Huang Chong retreated, Wang Chongyang was finally able to free his hands. Because his vitals were being controlled, he knew that he would not be able to escape. Instead, he chose to exchange his life for the masked man's. There was a move in the Chuanjin sect's martial arts, and with Wang Chongyang's current cultivation, he naturally did not have to use a sword. He twisted his arm and stabbed backwards at an incredible angle. The Xiantian skill and the first yang finger directly hit the man's lower abdomen. The masked man retreated. Although his face was covered, it was obvious that his breathing was much faster than usual. It was obvious that the previous move had injured him. However, Wang Chongyang sighed inwardly. He had been ambushed first, and the acupoint on his back had been suppressed right from the start. His opponent's qi had invaded his body, causing the might of his Xiantian skill and single sun finger to be more or less reduced. Right before he stabbed his opponent's lower abdomen, he had crashed into an extremely soft and invisible wall of qi, and a portion of his qi had instantly disappeared. Fortunately, the first yang finger was specialized in breaking internal jinqi. Otherwise, with his condition, he might not have been able to hit the opponent. However, after breaking through the wall of qi, the power of his finger was like an arrow at the end of its flight. Although he had injured the opponent, it was not a fatal injury. With the opponent's martial arts, he would be able to recover after a period of rest. Wang Chongyang's situation was much worse. The meridians in his body had been destroyed. Although he would not die immediately, he only had a few months left at most. The muscle bone strengthening scripture is indeed a famous divine skill for thousands of years. Which eminent monk of Shaolin Temple are you? Not far away, the drunken monk finally caught his breath and said in a hoarse voice. Although it had been a long time, it had only been a few breaths' time since the masked man had appeared and attacked him. He could naturally tell what kind of martial arts had injured him from the short fight just now. Only then did the other people in the field notice the drunken monk's situation. Originally, he had been practicing the 9 yang divine skill and looked radiant. But now his cheeks seemed to be much shriveled, and he looked more like an ordinary thin old man who could be blown away by the wind. The masked man showed a strange expression and said in a low voice, "Master's 9 yang divine skill really deserves its reputation. Just now, in a split second, you were able to sacrifice your essence and cultivation to save your life. Given time, you may be able to regain your cultivation." The drunken monk sighed. How can I leave the mountain alive today? Normally, he had the 9 yang divine skill to protect his body. Ordinary injuries would automatically recover after a few circulations of the 9 yang genuine qi. Even if he was seriously injured, he would recover very quickly. But just now, the opponent's attack directly exceeded the recovery range of the 9 yang genuine qi, so he had to use a secret technique to save his life. However, the reason why a secret technique was called a secret technique was obviously because it came with a great price. Now that his cultivation had fallen, even if he could leave safely, he might not be able to return to the great Grandmaster realm for the rest of his life. No, his internal energy just now. Huang Chong, who was lying on the ground, said weakly. Although his vitality was gone, he still had the foundation of a great Grandmaster, so he wouldn't die immediately. "Master!" The yellow-robed woman cried out in alarm and hurriedly ran to his side to help him up. She could feel his body was cold and his pulse was weak. She couldn't help but feel sad. Huang Chong didn't pay attention to her. He looked straight at the masked man and continued. He seems to be using the carefree sex method. On the other side, Wang Chongyang, who was sitting cross-legged and adjusting his breath, nodded and agreed, "That's right. Just now, his genuine chi seemed to be the dark north divine skill. Carrying the Shaolin Temple and the carefree sect, could it be that you are—" The drunkard monk suddenly thought of someone. The man took off the black cloth on his head and faintly sighed. "The reason why I hid my identity was because I didn't want to implicate other related people. I didn't expect that I would still be recognized by you." Only then did everyone notice his shiny bald head and white beard. They thought that it was no wonder he covered his head with a mask. It turned out that he was hiding his identity as a monk. The yellow-robed woman had already recognized the other person's identity. She couldn't help but be shocked and angry. "Sweeping monk, so it's you." "Amipa." The sweeping monk put his palms together, but his face was extremely pale. In the blink of an eye, he had seriously injured 3 great grandmasters. Although it was a sneak attack, it was easier said than done to injure a great grandmaster. The 3 attacks just now had almost exhausted all of his energy. Of course, a great grandmaster was a great grandmaster after all. There was a huge gap between them and ordinary masters. Even if he was in his weakest state now, even if others present wanted to take advantage of the situation, they would not be his opponent. The yellow-robed woman angrily rebuked. "I used to think that you were an enlightened monk. I didn't expect that you were just a despicable person who secretly attacked." "Benefactress, you're right." The sweeping monk did not defend himself. He looked at the drunkard monk and the others with eyes full of guilt. Prince E, who was at the side, laughed and said, "What do you know? This is not a martial arts competition in Jianghu. The master bears the hatred of his country and family. This can be said to be his only chance. He must hit the target in one strike." Naturally, he couldn't care about other things. Hatred of his country and family? Xiaogo couldn't help but grit his teeth in hatred. Originally, victory was in his grasp. He saw that Prince Yi's party was about to be wiped out in one fell swoop. In the end, a sweeping monk suddenly appeared and turned the situation around. The key was that the 2 great grandmasters he relied on the most were both seriously injured. They might not even be able to keep their lives. Naturally, they could not continue to contribute. How could he not ask clearly, "Which fallen royal family from hundreds of years ago are you?" Because of Murong Bo's ridiculous motive, Xiaogo originally just asked casually. He didn't expect that it would arouse the emotions of the sweeping monk. "Originally, I also didn't want to say much. However, if I don't explain everything clearly, it would be a waste of my father's 100 years of painstaking effort. I also can't let the ancestors smile in the netherworld." The sweeping monk's originally peaceful eyes suddenly lit up with a bit of hatred. "Chun Xiao Rebellion, wearing the yellow robe. Do you still remember how your surnamed Zhao's throne came about?" Zhao Go's expression changed. "You are from the Chai family?" The sweeping monk looked to the north, his eyes full of nostalgia. That year, the wise and powerful Emperor Xiaowen died young. Because his first 3 sons were killed by the later Han dynasty's hermit Emperor Lu Qingyu, only the young 4th son could succeed the throne. In the end, Zhao Kuangyin bullied their orphans and widows. He came wearing the yellow robe and usurped the great Zhou dynasty. Huang Chang suddenly had a thought. "You are the descendant of King Ji, Chai Shijin?" All these years, he had been secretly investigating the whereabouts of the former later Zhou imperial clan. After Chai Zongxuan abdicated, he was conferred the title of King Zhong. This line had always been under the supervision of the imperial court. King Chao, Chai Shirong, disappeared on the day of the coup and wandered among the people. A few years ago, he had also found the whereabouts of this line. After Guo Sheng joined the Liangshan rebellion against the Song dynasty and failed, he lived in seclusion in Ox Village. He restored the surname of later Zhou's Taizu Guowei. Guo Jing was the only survivor of this line. The remaining 2 lines were King Ji, Chai Shijin, who was adopted by Pan Mei, and King Qi, Chai Shihui, who was adopted by Liu Yan. All of them changed their names and disappeared from the imperial court site. Please remember this book's domain name. Come, Wonderful Book House mobile version website. Com. Chapter 2018. The sixth prince adopted by Pan, Mei changed his name to Pan Lang, and the seventh prince adopted by Liu Yin changed his name to Liu Duishuan. The two later encouraged Zhao Tingmei to rebel. After the failure, Liu Duishuan was exiled to Yazhou, and Pan Lang hid in Jianghu. Finally, he called himself Xiaoyao Zi and founded the Xiaoyao sect. Of course, all of this was only discovered by Huang Chong in recent years. However, because the carefree sect had very few members and was always mysterious, no one knew about them. In addition, the imperial court had been plagued by internal and external troubles in recent years, so they didn't have time to deal with the carefree sect. Since the monk knew the martial arts of the Xiaoyao sect, he must be from the sixth prince's side. The monk looked like he was reminiscing, and his tone was full of sorrow. When my father hid in Jianghu, he did not forget to overthrow the Song dynasty and restore the Zhou dynasty. However, after the case of Zhao Tingmei, he knew that the fate of the Song dynasty was still there, so he could only pin his hope on the later generations. So he accepted 3 talented disciples and taught them according to their aptitude. The first disciple, Wu Xingyun, taught her the eye, the unique and righteous. The second disciple, Wu Yazi, taught her the dark north divine skill. The third disciple, Li Qiushui, taught her the small formless skill. Many people present did not know the inside story. After listening to him, they knew that the famous Tianshan Tong Lao and the others were the disciples of the monk's father. They were all shocked. The monk continued. Father asked them to cultivate their own forces in the western region, Xixia, and the Central Plains. They agreed that when there was a change in the Song dynasty, they would take action together to restore the Zhou dynasty. Who would have thought that they would be trapped by love and become enemies? How could they still remember father's entrustment? In these years, the Song dynasty was in turmoil. Feng La's rebellion, Yang Yao's rebellion, Jin Kong's rebellion, and the Jin kingdom had searched the south several times. Which one was not a great opportunity? Father never had such an opportunity in his life. Who knew that the 3 of them had missed so many good opportunities? Speaking of this, the monk's originally kind face suddenly showed a bit of ferocity. Obviously, he hated these people for letting down his father's lifelong efforts. Looking at the hostility on his face, the drunkard monk frowned and said, "You are possessed." Good. The monk put his palms together, and his demeanor became calm again. Yes, this matter has become a demon in my heart. Originally, I had been hiding in the Shaolin Temple's Sutra Pavilion, deeply influenced by the scriptures of the previous generations of senior monks. I had thought that I had let go of everything, but when the people of the Spirit Mountain Village came to find me, I realized that I hadn't forgotten anything. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Although we might not be able to restore the great Zhou dynasty, we can at least cause chaos in the Song dynasty. Killing an emperor would be a good way to wash away the humiliation that the great Zhou royal family suffered when they were in the yellow robe. It would also fulfill my father's dying wish. You want to kill me? Let's see if you have the ability. Zhao Go suddenly realized that the other party was probably trying to stall for time by saying so much. They had just heavily injured 3 great grandmasters. How could they not pay the price? Now, he must be an arrow at the end of its flight. If he was given a chance to breathe and recover with his great grandmaster realm, how could the people on their side be a match for him? As soon as he finished speaking, he transformed into an afterimage and attacked the floor-sweeping monk. He truly moved like a fleeing rabbit, and in the blink of an eye, he was already less than a foot away from the floor-sweeping monk, and their noses were practically about to collide. The strangeness of this charge was unimaginable, and the speed of his movement was even more indescribable. What a strange movement technique. Many people in the field sighed. Just now, when Zhao Go attacked Shirpatian, his movement technique wasn't even this fast. As it turned out, facing a great grandmaster, Zhao Go didn't dare to be careless. He used his full strength the moment he started. In his fear, he even used 120% of his power. When normal people fought, their hands were usually used to defend against 3 feet away. If the opponent came within a few inches of them, it would be very difficult for their hands to defend, and they wouldn't be able to use their strengths. So what if you're a great grandmaster? Zhao Gou's movement technique was already as fast as lightning. Now that he was so close to the other party, he was even more determined to win. One hand pressed towards the other's chest, and the other hand hit embroidery needles and stabbed towards the other's eyes. He was very confident in his speed. At such a close distance, even if the other was a great grandmaster, he definitely wouldn't be able to dodge. Furthermore, the other had used up most of his energy and most likely didn't have much inner power left. Almost in the blink of an eye, his attack hit the other. But just as the corner of his mouth rose slightly, he heard the wine-fighting monk and Huang Chang call out in unison, "Careful!" Zhao Gou's smile instantly froze, because he already felt that the feeling coming from his hand was not right. The wine-fighting monk in front of him slowly dissipated. So what he had just stabbed was just an afterimage. Understanding all of this, Zhao Gou felt all the hair on his body stand on end. He hurriedly used his ghost-like movement technique to float to the side, but his body had just moved when a palm suddenly pressed down on his shoulder. "Ah!" Zhao Gou let out an incredibly shrill scream. Then, his entire body shook as if he had been electrocuted. Dark North Divine Art. Wang Chongyang instantly recognized the martial art technique that the wine-fighting monk had used. Just now, the power of his finger had been used up by the Dark North True Qi. Official. Although the yellow-robed girl didn't like this half-brother of hers, how could she not save him? She casually grabbed a long sword and rushed over, trying to save Zhao Gou. She saw the sweeping monk control Zhao Gou with one hand and slowly raise the other. The yellow-robed girl felt her wrist go numb, and she couldn't hold the long sword in her hand anymore. Then, a soft force hit her shoulder. She instantly felt all the pressure points in her body being sealed. Her entire body fell to the side powerlessly. It is said that the Tianshan Plum breaking hand of the Xiao Yao sect can gather all the martial arts in the world into it. I didn't think much of it before, but seeing it today, it really lives up to its reputation, Huang Chang said emotionally. The sweeping monk replied, "In terms of the breadth of martial arts, what in the world can compare to Brother Huang's 9 manual? It's a pity that we can't have a fair fight. I was a bit despicable." Huang Chang shook his head and said, "If you and I were in each other's shoes, I would have done the same. Also, you heavily injured the 3 of us in one move. Your timing was very precise. I'm afraid there is no one else in the world with this kind of eyesight and skill." As a great grandmaster who had lived for almost 100 years, his temperament was naturally different from ordinary people. Now that things had come to this, he had already accepted it. He was also very impressed by the other party's ability to hit the target in one strike. On the other side, the wine-fighting monk couldn't help but say, "I also admire this monk, but the only thing I don't understand is that Brother Chongyang seems to be from your mansion of spirits as well. Why did you also attack him?" Before the sweeping monk could answer, Wang Chongyang spoke first. "What's so hard to understand? We don't have any relationship with the mansion of spirits. We only came together because of a common goal. I'm only rebelling against Zhao Gou, that incapable ruler, but I'm still loyal to the court and this country. He's rebelling against the entire Song dynasty. Naturally, the 2 of us aren't on the same path. To avoid future trouble, we might as well end things once and for all. If it were me, I would most likely do the same." He had fought on the battlefield in the past, so he naturally understood the principle of using all means possible. He couldn't give the enemy any chance to counterattack, and his own cultivation would become the biggest variable in the future, so he naturally couldn't keep it. The sweeping monk sighed and said, "You all understand it this way, but you actually helped me get out of it. I'm really ashamed." At this time, Zhao Gou had already been released, but he didn't have any strength left. His entire hair was white, his cheeks were shriveled, and his eyes were lifeless. He seemed to have aged a few decades compared to his usual self. The sweeping monk looked down at the emperor, who was like a pile of mud on the ground. The viciousness on his face slowly faded. I've already destroyed your inner strength and meridians. From now on, you are a useless person. Killing you would actually be letting you off easy. From now on, you will live a life worse than death. That would be enough to comfort the souls of our ancestors in heaven. Zhao Go didn't say a word, his eyes extremely empty. This time, he had used all his schemes to hide the fact that he was a top master. But in exchange for such a tragic ending, how could he accept it in such a short time? The sweeping monk frowned slightly. But I am very curious. The movement technique you used just now seemed to be from the Sunflower Manual. How do you know the Sunflower Manual? Zhao Go didn't seem to hear him. It was Huang Chong who sighed and explained, "It's not the Sunflower Manual, it's just the Bixie Sword Manual." The people of Jianghu only know that the Bixie Sword Manual is the ultimate technique of the Fu Wei Escort Company's Lin family in Fujian, but they don't know that the ancestor of the Lin family, Lin Yuan too, was from the Gusu Lin family. Gusu Lin family? When Wang Chongyang heard this family, a strange expression appeared on his face. The yellow-robed woman, who had fallen to the side, thought that the Lin family didn't have many people. The leader of this generation was the Salt and Iron Envoy, Lin Ruhai. Huang Chong continued, "Everyone thinks that Lin Yuanta died and left the Bixie Sword Manual in the Fu Wei Escort Company. In reality, he was tired of the conflicts of Jianghu and returned to the Lin family. Later, he also left a sword manual in the Lin family, but the requirements to practice it were very strict. Cough, cough. Plus, the Lin family was a family of officials, so no one practiced this dangerous martial art. Later, this sword manual was obtained by the court, and the officials coincidentally met the requirements to practice it, so they practiced this sword technique. The great grandmasters present were knowledgeable and naturally knew the requirements to practice the Bixie sword technique. When they thought of Zhao Go's incapacity, they all understood. Not far away, Wang Chongyang coughed a few times. "Brother Huang, you are wrong. There is still a descendant of the Lin family who practiced this sword technique." "Who?" Huang Chong asked curiously. Wang Chongyang didn't answer directly, but looked deeply at Xiao Long Nu, who was not far away. "Brother Huang, don't you think that Miss Long Nu's pure heart of jade maiden swordplay looks familiar?" Huang Chong suddenly understood. No wonder, no wonder. I felt that her sword technique was similar to the Emperor's martial art. It's just that she was too beautiful, like a fairy dancing with the sword. So people didn't think that way. Wang Chongyang had a gentle expression on his face. Back then, Chao Ying was extremely beautiful and different from the other ladies. She didn't like the embroidery of female workers, but liked to play with knives and swords. She could learn any martial art just by looking at it. Later, by chance, she found a secret manual at home. She studied it for a long time. At the time, I was very curious about what secret manual could trouble her for so long and wanted to help her study it. But she refused to let me see it. At the time, I thought she was competitive and afraid that I would learn a powerful martial art that would surpass her. Now that I think about it, she was afraid that I wouldn't be able to resist the temptation and learn this martial art to wield a knife. Now that I know that the secret manual of the Lin family is the Bixie sword technique, all my previous doubts can be solved. Ancestor Grandma, Xiao Long Nu mumbled to herself. How could she not know who he was talking about? Dojo Monk couldn't help but sigh. Miss Lin is really a genius. She actually forcefully changed this evil martial art into a martial art suitable for women to practice. She also changed the vicious and treacherous path, and when she uses it, it feels like a fairy. First, set a small goal. For example, remember in 1 second, Booksellers Mobile. Chapter 2019. She is indeed a genius. Wang Chongyang's eyes showed a trace of tenderness, but he quickly thought of his current situation. If she knew about it, he was afraid that she would laugh at him. He frowned immediately. After listening to their narration, the sweeping monk breathed a sigh of relief. I thought. He did not finish his sentence. Everyone was still in shock, and no one paid attention. This matter is over. I should leave. The sweeping monk put his palms together and bowed to Huang Chong and the others to express his apologies. At this time, Zhao Go suddenly spoke. Since you hate our surnamed Zhao to the bone, why didn't you kill him? Everyone looked in the direction he pointed and saw Prince Yi's expression changing. Prince Yi had just seen that the sweeping monk did not even let Wang Chongyang of the Mansion of Spirits go. He was already muttering in his heart. He could only pray that the sweeping monk would forget him. Who knew that Zhao Go would mention it? Zhao Go continued. You should know that after I die, Prince Yi will most likely usurp the throne and become the emperor. Isn't it still our country? What is the meaning of your actions this time? He was, after all, a hero of his generation. Even though he had lost so badly, he immediately realized the opportunity when he recovered a little. Provoke the relationship between the sweeping monk and Prince Yi. Even if he died, he would drag Prince Yi down with him. The sweeping monk shook his head slightly. It's better that he is alive. Why? Zhao Go was shocked and hurriedly asked. After all, there is still a crown prince in the capital. If I kill Prince Yi, won't it help the crown prince you chose to smoothly ascend the throne? The sweeping monk said, if I leave him alive, he will definitely fight with the crown prince. At that time, there will be a fierce battle. With Prince Yi's scheming, the crown prince will definitely not be his opponent. But after he ascends the throne, the world will not obey him. In the future, those ambitious members of your Zhao family will definitely learn from him and use righteousness to suppress him. In this way, your Zhao family will never have a day of peace. Zhao Go was shocked. He did not think that the sweeping monk could see so clearly. After such an analysis, the subsequent development was most likely as he said. Prince Yi was about to cry. Although he knew that the sweeping monk was scheming against him, he could not help but thank him for not killing him. But he was worried that he would make the sweeping monk change his mind. So he opened his mouth and did not dare to say anything. The sweeping monk slowly walked down the mountain path. Everyone could see that his face was pale. They knew that after dealing with the surprise attacks of 3 great grandmasters and Zhao Go, no matter how powerful he was now at the end of his tether. But no one dared to stop him. Whether it was Zhao Go's side or King Yi's side, they all wanted him to leave quickly. Seeing his back getting further and further, King Yi stood up proudly. Of Zhao Go's side was that prince. Of Prince Yi, and of they all of them wanted him. Family, as I said before, if you do not it, I King said of it of king of E comma comma of It was a pity that Song Qing-shu did not keep his promise. Otherwise, you would not have succeeded. Looking at the other party getting closer and closer, Zhao Go's tone was full of resentment. Originally, his side had the absolute advantage. He had hidden his ultimate martial arts for so many years, but because Song Qing-shu had not come, it had caused all his efforts to go to waste. Now, the person he hated the most was not the floor-sweeping monk, King Yi, and the others, but Song Qing-shu, who had never appeared. He was held up by Prime Minister Jia's men. How could he come back so quickly? Prince Yi sneered, thinking that Xia Quan and Lu Gu had about 100,000 men and horses under their command. Perhaps by this time, they had already conquered Yangzhou under the surname Song. But official can rest assured. On the day I ascend the throne, I will certainly eliminate the surname Song. It can also be considered as avenging official. Song Qing-shu's martial arts and reputation were too high. He also had 100,000 elite soldiers under him. If any member of the royal family tried to rope him in, Prince Yi's throne might not be secure. Naturally, he had to get rid of Song Qing-shu first. He heard that Song Qing-shu had beautiful women around him. When the time came, he would take advantage of the situation and accept them. Men, send the family on their way. Prince Yi waved his hand and called for a subordinate. He was not stupid. How could he do something like regicide himself? It would leave a handle for the world to use against him for no reason. Now that one of his subordinates killed Zhao Go, he could even be used as a scapegoat in the future. That subordinate was a death warrior raised by Prince Yi. He did not hesitate and slashed at Zhao Go's head. At this moment, a cold light flashed. The waist knife in his hand was blocked by a long sword. Looking at the incomparably beautiful woman in front of him, Prince Yi was stunned. Miss you, you are. Xiao Long Nu frowned slightly and said indifferently, you just said that you want to get rid of Song. Qing Shu. Princey wanted to give himself a big slap. Seeing that he was about to rise to the top in one step, he got carried away and actually forgot that when Xiao Long Nu failed to enter the palace to assassinate him, it was Song Qingshu who protected her. If the two of them did not have an affair, why would he take such a big risk? Just now, he said that those women with the surname Song were all beautiful. Now, any one of them was as beautiful as a fairy. He looked at Xiao Long Nu greedily. Prince Yi realized that as his power grew, the desire in his heart grew stronger. I don't like the look in your eyes now. Xiao Long Nu turned her body sideways, a hint of disgust in her eyes. Prince Yi's face darkened. He thought to himself that he was going to be the emperor soon. How dare a woman from the pugilistic world like you give me that look? He wanted to reprimand her a little, but then he remembered that Li Qingluo and Xiao Long Nu were highly skilled in martial arts. If they were to fall out now, it would really bring about changes. It was better to wait for the situation to be settled, and then slowly deal with these two women. While the two of them were in a stalemate, suddenly there was a loud explosion in the distance. Everyone subconsciously turned their heads. The sweeping monk walked a little slowly. When he was about 100 feet away from the bamboo forest, the ground suddenly exploded. Countless hidden weapons mixed with the soil shot towards his body, sealing off all his escape routes. No matter how amazing his Qigong was, he would not be able to avoid it. The sweeping monk had just plotted against the three grandmasters. How could he not guard against others doing the same? The reason why he walked so slowly just now was that he had to seize the time to digest the power that he had absorbed from Zhao Go using the Northern Underworld Divine skill. If it was a normal day, although Zhao Go's inner power was strong, the sweeping monk's cultivation was even more unfathomable. After absorbing his lifetime's power, he could quickly transform it into his own power. But this time, he schemed to severely injure the three grandmasters, and then he was counterattacked by Wang Chongyang. In addition, he had to deal with Zhao Go's attack later. His own inner power could be said to be exhausted. In this kind of situation, the process of refining Zhao Go's power was much slower than usual. However, he slowly left like this. The hundreds of feet of distance gave him enough time to refine most of Zhao Go's inner power. It was enough for him to face the danger that suddenly appeared. He spread his robe, and the ultimate skill of heaven and earth in the sleeve became even more amazing. The hidden weapons and soil that filled the sky were all collected into his sleeve. But it was clear that the enemy did not intend to use these hidden weapons to kill a grandmaster. Following behind the hidden weapons was an old man in green with a long beard and a square headscarf on his head. The movement of the old man in green was very unique. It was very different from the movements of the martial arts world of the Central Plains. He was originally in front, but suddenly he moved to the right side of the sweeping monk, and his palm struck towards his ribs. There was no technique to this palm, but the air at the center of the palm seemed to be twisted, reflecting a strange light. This martial art looks a little familiar. Wang Chongyang was deep in thought. Huang Chong humphed weakly. The martial art of the Isle of Heroes. He had just fought with Sherpatian for a long time, so he could naturally be sure. Judging by his appearance, I wonder if he is the Dragon Island Master or the Wood Island Master. The drunkard monk was very curious. Now that the three grandmasters were all disabled, they had let go of everything else. They just watched everything with the attitude of watching a show, hoping that the more chaotic it was, the better. Wang Chongyang answered. The Isle of Heroes rewards the good and punishes the evil. One of them wears yellow, and the other wears green. Since this person is wearing green, he must be the Wood Island Master. Zhao Go said coldly, Jia Shi, that old man. Jia Shi was Jia Shidao's half-brother. He had almost inherited the title of Duke Ronghua, so he naturally went to the palace to visit the emperor. Now that he was here, it meant that Jia Shidao had finally made his move. Unfortunately, he had lost everything. He had no pawns to use, and he didn't even have the right to enter the game. It was all because of the wrong information. At first, he thought that the Mansion of Spirits was controlled by Jia Sherdao, but he didn't expect King Yi to have so many masters. Is it another great grandmaster? Someone asked. The grandmasters looked at each other and then shook their heads. Wang Chongyang said, looks like, but not. Huang Chang added, this palm is almost at the threshold of the great grandmaster realm. He could be considered half a step to the great grandmaster realm. However, the three of them knew that the difference of one word could make a huge difference. It seemed that the difference wasn't far, but many top masters couldn't break through to the great grandmaster realm in their lifetime. Although it's still not mature enough, with nameless current state, it's hard to say who will win, the drunkard monk murmured to himself. They didn't have time to chat anymore. They all watched the changes of the battle intently. In the blink of an eye, the sweeping monk had already exchanged several moves with the wood island master. The sweeping monk was obviously very afraid of his palm power, so he didn't take it head-on. Instead, he used excellent body movements to resolve it. Seeing him in danger, many people felt a trace of sadness in their hearts. They thought that a great grandmaster was going to die in the hands of a small fry. After all, Huang Chang and the other two had been injured by a great grandmaster, which was in line with everyone's expectations. Only a great grandmaster had the ability to injure a great grandmaster. If such a top great grandmaster was killed by someone of higher realm, it would really make people sigh. Suddenly, the sweeping monk made his move. He gave a light slap, as gentle as a lover's caress. Seeing this, Huang Chang and Wang Chongyang both turned to look at the drunkard monk. He had been seriously injured by this slap. Umitba. The drunkard monk seemed to see the end, and his voice was full of sorrow. When the Wood Island master saw his palm coming, he was greatly alarmed. However, he thought that his opponent was now an arrow at the end of its flight, and his own palm power should have reached him first. As such, he clenched his teeth, didn't dodge, and continued to press his palm down. However, his pupils suddenly constricted. He didn't know how the other party's light palm had somehow reached him first, even though it had been launched later. The Wood Island master suddenly felt a sharp pain all over his body. He could no longer stand steadily and fell to his knees on the ground. The sweeping monk wasn't feeling well either. If it had been a normal day, this slap would have been enough to kill his opponent and leave him unscathed. However, he was now an arrow at the end of its flight. In the end, he still couldn't avoid his opponent's palm. In an instant, he felt several of his ribs break, and half of his body was paralyzed. At this moment, the ground behind him suddenly exploded again. A figure suddenly leaped out, and, taking advantage of the brief moment of paralysis, a punch landed on his back. Chapter 2020. The sweeping monk stumbled a dozen steps forward and finally sat down under a big tree. His white beard was full of blood. Obviously, the punch was so powerful that it had severely injured him. The man didn't continue to chase. No one in the world could survive a full blow from him. As the saying goes, don't chase a cornered enemy. After all, the man was a great master, and it was inevitable that he would have some secret skills. If he was killed by the man, he would lose more than he gained. Great master. Even though Huang Chang and the others didn't say anything, the others all had the same judgment. The man behind him was obviously much stronger than Island Master Mu, both in body movements and martial arts. Huang Chang and the others looked at each other. The sweeping monk had just found a chance to injure them. But in the blink of an eye, he was also injured by a sneak attack. It was really sad. Why? Island Master Mu had been hit by the sweeping monk, and his life was already gone. However, the sweeping monk wasn't at his peak at that time, so he was still alive. He wasn't asking the sweeping monk, but the man who came out later. The man had his back to everyone, and now everyone saw his face clearly. He had a mustache and a long beard. Who else could it be but Jia Sherdao? He's a great master? Zhao Go recognized him and couldn't believe it. Huang Chang frowned as well. He should know a special martial arts skill that can hide his breath. Jia Sherdao often went to the palace before, and he could sense that his martial arts skill was very high, but not at the great master realm. Combined with the power he had now, it was obvious that he had been deliberately hiding his strength. Old cunning fools. King Yi cursed under his breath. Zhao Go was obviously a top master, but he always pretended to be weak. Jia Sherdao was even more cunning. Previously, when they were cooperating, he used all kinds of excuses, saying that he couldn't deal with a few great grandmasters. King Yi had believed him and used the great grandmasters in the Mansion of Spirits. In the end, Jia Sherdao had taken advantage of him. What do you mean, why? Jia Sherdao looked at Island Master Mu and said calmly, which made the others feel strange. They thought, aren't you guys brothers? Now that your brother is seriously injured, you should at least go and check on him and heal him. Island Master Mu's tone was weak, but his eyes were full of hatred. If you and I join hands to deal with the sweeping monk, who is like an arrow at the end of its flight, it should be in the bag. Why didn't you make a move and let me face all of his attacks alone? Jia Sherdao replied. The sweeping monk is unfathomable. I don't know what other trump cards he has up his sleeve, so I asked you to test him, and I'll strike when I have the perfect opportunity. I just didn't expect him to be able to hurt you like this in his current state. Island Master Mu sneered. Now that things have come to this, who are you trying to fool by saying this? Jia Sherdao frowned and didn't answer. Island Master Mu was unwilling and continued. You clearly have the intention of killing me with a borrowed knife, but I don't understand. Why do you want me dead? You don't understand? Jia Sherdao seemed to be triggered by something hidden in his heart, and a murderous look flashed in his eyes. If you don't want people to know, then don't do it. Island Master Mu's eyes were filled with confusion. What do you mean? Jia Sherdao snorted. Are you still going to pretend? How did my precious jade die? Island Master Mu's expression changed greatly. Is Bao Yu dead? Isn't he missing? Jia Sherdao said expressionlessly. Do you think that with my power and the intelligence network of the Isle of Heroes, there's anyone in the world that I can't find? But Bao Yu seems to have disappeared into thin air, and we haven't found any clues after so long. Unless he's already dead. Island Master Mu replied in a deep voice. That's right. I've always had this thought, but I didn't want to make you sad, so I didn't tell you. But I really wasn't the one who killed him. Jia Sherdao looked at him deeply. Do you think people like us would believe someone just because they say so? We only look at the interests behind it, and after thinking about it, only you would have the motive to do so. As soon as Bao Yu died, your Lien would be the nominal heir of the Jia family. I worked so hard to get this great power, but in the end, I gave it to someone else. Do you think I'm a fool? At first, I suspected Lien and her husband. Wang Shifeng seemed to be a powerful person, but then I thought that even if they wanted to, they didn't have the ability to kill Bao Yu without anyone knowing. After thinking about it, it was only you. Island Master Mu was at the end of his rope, and his voice was getting weaker and weaker. It really wasn't me. Jia Sherdao was expressionless. Obviously, he didn't believe him at all. He just thought that Island Master Mu's refusal to admit it was to protect his descendants. Ignoring Island Master Mu, Jia Sherdao turned around and walked toward the small yard step by step. King Yi's expression changed slightly, and he subconsciously took a few steps back. The aura of a great master wasn't just for show. Thinking that he didn't have a master who could fight against him, he suddenly felt uneasy. Prime Minister Jia, the dust has settled here. It's all thanks to Prime Minister Jia's wonderful foresight. King Yi's tone was full of flattery. At the same time, he thought to himself that when this was over, he must find another great master to protect him. Otherwise, it would be too much pressure to deal with Jia Sherdao. At the same time, he wasn't very worried that Jia Sherdao would harm him. After all, Jia Sherdao wouldn't dare to go against the world and declare himself emperor, would he? He had to rely on his own identity to be justified. Jia Sherdao glanced around, and seeing that Huang Chang and the others were only breathing in, he finally felt completely relieved. As for Li Qingluo, Xiao Long Nu, and the others, they might be considered masters in Jianghu, but he didn't take them seriously. The dust has settled. I'm afraid not, Jia Sherdao said with a faint smile. Oh, King, he was stunned. What else is not settled? The masters on Zhaogo's side had all died miserably. Who else could do anything? As for Zhu Banji and the others, They were almost wiped out by Huang Yaoshi's melody of the rising tide. Plus, the people he had arranged for them couldn't come here at all. The bodyguards at the foot of the mountain were also stalled, and they were far away. Jia Shidao walked in front of Zhao Go and looked at him condescendingly. His eyes were full of sarcasm and disdain. The death of an emperor is a big deal. You have to give the people an explanation about the cause of death. King Yi was confused and said, "Didn't we agree to let Song Qing-shu be the scapegoat? He is good at martial arts, and he has a bad reputation for sleeping around. We can say that he had an affair with concubine Wu, and the officials found out. So the adulterous couple went all out. That's cruel." Zhao Go suddenly thought that it was a good idea. He could let Song Qing-shu be the scapegoat, and then let them fight each other. Not far away, Xiao Long frowned slightly. Li Qingluo pulled her hand, signaling her not to act rashly. Jia Shidao smiled and said, "But Song Qing-shu didn't show up at Wu-Tang Mountain, and he was stalled in Yangzhou. Maybe many people saw him, and they wouldn't believe our story." King Yi frowned. "Then what should we do?" "I have a better idea." Jia Shidao smiled weirdly and said, "Would you like to hear it, Your Highness?" Seeing his smile, King Yi had a bad feeling, but he kept smiling. His face was still full of smiles. "Prime Minister, please speak." Jia Shidao said calmly, "King Yi deliberately organized the Mansion of Spirits and hired the masters in the Jianghu to assassinate the officials in Wu-Tang Mountain, trying to usurp the throne. I narrowly escaped and returned to Xiangyang to mobilize the troops in the capital to kill King Yi and the other traitors. What do you think of this story, Your Highness?" King Yi's face changed, and he forced a smile and said, "You must be joking, Prime Minister." Jia Shidao shook his head and said, "Compared with Song Qing-shu, everyone knows that Your Highness is a traitor. I think people are more willing to believe this story." At that moment, King Yi suddenly jumped up and ran down the mountain. He didn't even have time to call the men of sacrifice from the Mansion of Spirits. Jia Shidao seemed to have expected this, and he also moved like a galloping horse. The lightness skills of the island of chivalry really live up to the saying, "A silver saddle shines on a white horse, galloping like a shooting star." On the other side, Dojo Monk couldn't help but praise. The great master was very knowledgeable, so he had naturally heard of some kung fu of the island of chivalry. Now that things had come to this, there was nothing they could do, so they didn't have to worry about anything else. They just sat back and watched. King Yi was a very hateful person. Letting Jia Shidao kill him would be a relief for everyone. Of course, it would be better if the two of them could fight each other and hurt each other. However, they all knew that it was impossible. Although King Yi was good at kung fu, he was no match for a great master. As expected, Jia Shidao caught King Yi's shoulder and threw him back to the ground like a dead dog. "Your Highness, there are still many men of sacrifice from the Mansion of Spirits in the bamboo forest." Seeing this, they all rushed over with their swords, trying to save King Yi. Jia Shidao snorted and stamped his foot on the ground. The scattered weapons on the ground, such as knives, spears, and swords, were all shaken up. Then he waved his sleeves, and those inanimate objects instantly turned into the most horrible, murderous aura, nailing all the men of sacrifice who were rushing over to the trees. Seeing this, King Yi couldn't help but look defeated. He had lost his last support, and he said, "No, you can't kill me. If you kill me, the crown prince will inherit the throne. He has always hated you. You should know that if he becomes the crown prince, you won't have a good time." Jia Shidao's face was gloomy. He knew that King Yi was telling the truth. The crown prince liked to play the guqin, so Jia Shidao had trained a beautiful woman who was good at playing the guqin and sent her to the crown prince. The beautiful woman was good at the guqin, chess, calligraphy, and painting. She was also educated, so the crown prince quickly fell in love with her. There was a map on the wall in the palace. The crown prince once pointed at the Cheonya state and said, "If I succeed in the future, I will put Jia Shidao here." He also used to call Jia Shidao Xian because he would either be exiled to the Xian state or the N state. How could Jia Sherdao tolerate such a crown prince becoming the crown prince? Although he was ambitious, he was now second only to the crown prince. He had been hesitating until he found out about the crown prince's attitude toward him. Finally, he made up his mind and began to prepare for this shocking plan. Who said I want the crown prince to inherit the throne? We can just support a trustworthy member of the royal family. I think Lord Beijing is a good choice. Jia Sherdao snorted. Although Lord Beijing was also from the Isle of Heroes, he wasn't one of them. He just wanted to let him pass for a while, and he had other plans for the future. Zhao Guo's entire body was extremely weak. At this time, he finally gathered a bit of strength and said, "What a wishful thinking. But there are so many people here who saw you murder the emperor. Can you really shut the mouths of the world?" Jia Sherdao glanced around and said expressionlessly, "Kill them all. Then no one will know what happened here." Please remember the domain name of this book. Come. Wonderful Book House mobile version. Come. Chapter 2021. What? Everyone subconsciously held their weapons and took a few steps back. However, they were afraid that they would be struck by lightning if they moved, so they didn't dare to be the first to come out. As for the great grandmasters, they had already gotten over it long ago. They looked calm and indifferent. Li Qingluo's hand, which was holding Xiao Long Nu's, was shaking. She whispered, "I'll try my best to hold him back. You're good at lightness skill, so maybe you can escape." Xiao Long Nu shook her head. "You're good at lightness skill, too. I'll hold him back. You should go." Li Qingluo frowned and said, "My wave-like subtle steps is the best at dodging, so I can hold him back for a while." "How can you? Don't be impulsive. I'm older than you, and I've experienced everything in my life. You still have many years to enjoy. Remember to tell Song what happened here, in case he falls into Jia Sherdao's trap in the future. And if possible, ask him to avenge me." Xiao Long Nu hesitated and didn't say anything. The descendants of the ancient tomb sect had always been pure. She didn't feel sad when Grandma's son died in front of her. Now that Li Qingluo's analysis was reasonable, she didn't argue with her anymore. At this time, Jia Sherdao waved his hand, and a group of fully armed soldiers surrounded them with crossbows. The rest of the people from the House of Spirits tried to fight back, but they were quickly killed. These people seemed to have received orders in advance. They only shot the remaining guards of the House of Spirits and didn't attack anyone else. Li Qingluo and Xiao Long Nu looked at each other and didn't move. It wasn't a good time to escape. Soon, only Yin Lighting and them were left standing. The others were seriously injured and on the verge of death, lying on the ground. Prime Minister, we're on the same side. We're on the same side." Murong Bo had barely gotten used to being blind, so he crawled over and grabbed Jia Sherdao's trousers. He knew how pathetic he was right now, but he couldn't care less. He knew that if he died, there would be nothing left. He shouldered the hope of reviving the Yin kingdom. How could he die so easily? On the same side, Jia Sherdao sneered and said, "You are the descendants of the great Yin dynasty's royal family. I wouldn't dare to associate myself with you." Murong Bo squeezed out a smile with great difficulty. "It's already been 700 or 800 years. Being able to keep my life is already very fortunate. How could I dare to ask for anything else? In the future, I will definitely follow Lord Prime Minister's lead." Murong Fu had joined Jia Sherdao's side before, so he could be considered Jia Sherdao's confidant to some extent. He had been a guest before, so he was still a bit proud, so he hadn't completely joined Jia Sherdao. But now, he couldn't care less. "Follow my lead," Jia Sherdao snorted. "I almost lost everything because of what your son did in Sichuan. What's the point of keeping an ungrateful wolf cub like him?" After the incident in Sichuan, Murong Fu had been accused of treason, and everyone wanted to beat him up. How could Jia Sherdao want to be associated with him? What's more, Murong Fu had betrayed him, and there was only one betrayal. If there was one betrayal, there would be a second one. Now that Murong Bo was blind, how could he and his son still be of any use? That was a misunderstanding, Murong Bo hurriedly explained. Suddenly, he fiercely attacked Jia Sherdao's lower body with his finger. As an ambitious man, he had keenly realized from Jia Shidao's tone that he wouldn't let him go, so he decided to go all out and attack Jia Shidao at such a close distance. He might be able to save his life. Although he was blind, he still had his martial arts. Of course, under normal circumstances, he wouldn't be able to use his martial arts at all, let alone fight against a great master. Even if he were to fight against someone at the same level as him, or even someone who used to be far weaker than him, he wouldn't be able to use his martial arts. But now he was clinging to Jia Shidao's leg and begging. Even if he couldn't see, he could still see Jia Shidao's position. The fingers of his right hand Jia Shidao had been disabled by Song Qingshu's sword qi. This time, he clung to Jia Shidao's leg with his right hand and used joined finger with his left hand to poke Jia Shidao's lower abdomen. Joined finger was the most powerful unique skill of the Murong family. This time, in order to survive, he had condensed the peak of his lifetime martial arts. He had never used joined finger so well in his life. As long as he poked Jia Shidao's lower abdomen, even if Jia Shidao was a great master, he would be seriously injured even if he didn't die. At that time, he could take Jia Shidao down the mountain, and he should be able to save his life. After going down the mountain, he could find a place to hide and slowly inquire about Fu Er's whereabouts. As long as he was alive, there was hope. However, he suddenly felt a sharp pain coming from his finger, followed by a few crisp sounds. He knew that his finger had been twisted off. In his shock, he wanted to retreat, but a palm as heavy as Mount Tai had already slapped the top of his head. Murong Bo's body shook, and then he didn't know anything. Jia Shidao took out a handkerchief and wiped the blood on his hand. He said coldly, "Since I know you and your father are wolves, how could I let you get so close to me without taking precautions?" The people on the side looked from afar and saw Murong Bo's whole body lying on the ground like a pile of mud. His eyes, nose, and mouth were bleeding, and his expression was hideous. Obviously, he was dead, giving Murong Bo a taste of his own medicine. Most of Murong Bo's reputation had been built by Murong Bo. Although the people on the scene didn't like his character, they still sighed when they thought that such a master-level person was gone just like that. Only dead people can keep secrets. Murong Bo has lived his whole life. Why can't he see through this? Zhao Go, who was watching all this, felt a little happy. He wanted Jia Shidao to kill all these traitors. An official is indeed an official. He hit the nail on the head. Jia Shidao now had victory in his hands, so he wasn't in a hurry to make a move. He had been humble in front of this person for decades. If he killed him with one strike, the victory would be a little boring. Zhao Go glanced at Shi Patian, who was on the other side, and laughed. "If I'm not wrong, you won't keep this young man alive, right?" Jia Shidao smiled and didn't deny it. "What happened on the mountain can't be leaked." "Godfather." Shi Patian was shocked. He had been an orphan since he was a child, and he had never felt the warmth of a family. Jia Shidao had been very nice to him recently, and he had even adopted him as his son. In his heart, he had vaguely regarded Jia Shidao as his father, so he followed his orders obediently and helped him complete tasks several times. How could he have known that he would be killed in return? Jia Shidao showed a disdainful smile and didn't even look at him. His son could only be a precious treasure. How could this bastard want to be his son? "You're really cruel." Zhao Go took a few breaths, and then he had the strength to continue. "Look at this young man. He really does treat you as his family. You won't even let him go. Won't you disappoint your subordinates?" Jia Shidao snorted. "Are you still trying to drive a wedge between us? These are all loyal subordinates that I train myself. They are absolutely trustworthy." Shi Patian looked sad. He understood what Jia Shidao was implying. Obviously, he didn't trust him because he didn't know where he came from. Jia Shidao was more willing to trust the people that he had trained himself. Dojo Monk suddenly said, "You learned the legendary Hori Taishian Sutra?" "That's right." Jia Shidao was a little proud. Obviously, his achievements in martial arts were no less than his achievements in power. No wonder, no wonder. Only this legendary martial art can give birth to a great master. Huang Chang sighed. Although Jia Shidao was obviously the weakest among them under normal circumstances, he was still a great master. Moreover, the outcome had been decided, so there was no point in worrying about it. Let's go. At that moment, Li Qingluo pushed Xiao Long Nu and used the wavering subtle steps. She attacked Jia Sherdao with the wavering subtle steps. You overestimate yourself. Jia Sherdao snorted and took a step forward. Li Qingluo was shocked to find that the following changes of the wavering subtle steps were all restrained, so she couldn't dodge it. Wu Wang is pursuing the younger sister. At that moment, a voice suddenly came from the side. Those were the 2 steps of the wavering, subtle steps, and Li Qingluo had already memorized them. But normally, the younger sister would be pursuing the younger sister. If it was the other way around, wouldn't the person be tripped by themselves? But now, she couldn't dodge it, so she could only listen to the instructions of the voice. She didn't expect to dodge it so narrowly. Jia Sherdao looked back at the source of the voice and couldn't help but frown. You're not dead yet. Although I'm not dead, I'm not far from it. But seeing the daughter of an old friend in danger before I die, I can't just let her blood spill on the spot. The monk looked calm, as if he was talking about something that had nothing to do with him. At that moment, Xiao Long Nu also attacked with her sword. Jia Sherdao used his sleeve to block her sword, and then slapped his back to block the sword that came from behind. Xiao Longnu's sword was extremely fast, and the pure heart of the Jade Maiden swordplay was elusive. Even if she met someone whose martial arts were higher than hers, they would often be beaten into a sorry state by her swordplay, such as Jinlu and Fuwang. Unfortunately, Jia Sherdao was a great master, and there was a qualitative difference between them. How could he be hurt by her sword? After blocking his opponent's long sword, Jia Sherdao rushed forward and slapped her shoulder, which made it difficult for Xiao Long Nu to use her left and right into her combat. Flower under the moon. Wang Chongyang had seen her use the pure heart of Jade Maiden swordsmanship, so he quickly understood the essence of this sword technique. Plus, he knew that Xuanjin sword techniques and the pure heart of Jade Maiden swordsmanship like the back of his hand, and he was a great master, so he naturally knew what move Xiao Long Nu should use next. Little gardening chrysanthemum, light drinking wine, colorful brush drawing eyebrows, raising case to draw eyebrows. After directing several moves in a row, Wang Chongyang suddenly realized the meaning behind the names of these moves, and he suddenly felt a little lost. While he was in a daze, Xiao Long Nu was instantly in danger. Why didn't you leave just now? Seeing her stay, Li Qingluo was a little angry and a little relieved, but she didn't dare to delay, so she hurried over to help. The monk on the side also gave advice from time to time. He knew all the martial arts of the Xiaoyao sect, so it wasn't difficult for him to give advice to a junior. Seeing this, Lighting also joined the battle. His Tai Chi sword was the best among the 7 heroes. Plus, the pure heart of Jade Maiden swordsmanship was good at attacking, and the Tai Chi sword was good at defending. As soon as Lighting joined the battle, the pressure on the 2 girls was greatly relieved. Dojo Monk and Huang Chong looked at each other and began to teach Lighting how to use his moves. Although they didn't know Tai Chi sword, their martial arts were at a high level, so it wasn't difficult for them to teach Lighting how to use his moves and dodge. Xiao Long Nu and the other 2 were already the best of the young generation. Now, with the guidance of the great masters, the 3 of them were evenly matched with Jia Sherdao. After fighting for more than 10 rounds, he still couldn't defeat them. Jia Sherdao was angry. He knew that the monk and the others had unfathomable cultivation and extraordinary eyesight. With their guidance, it would be difficult for him to gain the upper hand in moves. After thinking about this, he already had an idea. Suddenly, he opened his mouth and shouted. Dozens of years of martial arts surged out. Although the 3 people in front of him were considered good in the Jianghu, they were still young and couldn't compare with the cultivation of the great masters. They were suddenly shocked by the sound wave and blacked out. Jia Sherdao took the opportunity to kick Lighting away, hit Li Qingluo's shoulder with one hand, and pressed the top of Xiao Long Nu's head with the other. In fact, he was a little hesitant when he attacked. Xiao Long Nu was as beautiful as a fairy, and it would be a pity if she died like this. If Baiyu was still alive, he would definitely like her. Please remember the domain name of this book. Com. Wonderful Book House mobile version website. Com. Chapter 2022. Jia Sherdao didn't look happy at all when he saw that his hand was on top of Xiao Longnu's head, because his hand didn't feel anything solid. As expected, Xiao Longnu's figure started to fade away. It turned out that what he had just hit was just an afterimage. Jia Sherdao looked up and saw a young man holding Xiao Longnu in his arms. He asked with concern, "Are you okay?" Seeing that everyone was looking at them, Xiao Longnu blushed a little. She struggled out of his arms and shook her head. "I'm fine." Jia Sherdao's expression changed. "Song Qingshu? Why are you here?" The man was Song Qingshu. His hair was a little messy, and there was a little sweat on his forehead. It was obvious that he had a hard time traveling here. "Why can't I be here?" Song Qingshu went over to check on Li Qingluo and Yin Lighting's injuries. Fortunately, Jia Sherdao had only intended to attack Xiao Longnu, so although the two of them were injured, they weren't fatal. Yangzhou, Jia Sherdao closed his mouth as soon as he opened his mouth. He thought that since his opponent was here, he must have taken care of everything there. He had underestimated him. What kind of lightness skill was that? "It's so close, yet so far," Song Qingshu answered as he checked on their injuries. Wang Chongyang, who wasn't far away, smiled. Back in the Chongyang Palace, his opponent had used this move to break his Big Dipper formation. He admired him a lot. When the woman in the yellow dress saw that he had finally come, she immediately relaxed. However, she was still a little annoyed. If he had come with her, the situation on the mountain wouldn't have been like this. Huang Chang and the drunkard monk both sighed. Although his opponent had come, he was still a little late. If the three of them had joined forces at the beginning, they wouldn't have been afraid of him. But then they thought about how cunning old foxes like the sweeper monk and Jia Sherdao were. And if he had come earlier, he might have ended up like them. King, he even looked a bit excited, because he knew that if Song Qingshu hadn't shown up, he would definitely have been killed by Jia Sherdao. At that time, he would have to be the scapegoat for the rebellion and kill the emperor, which would help him maintain his reputation as a loyal minister. Although falling into Song Qingshu's hands wouldn't end well, he was happy as long as Jia Sherdao didn't get what he wanted. He and Jia Sherdao were partners, and now Jia Sherdao betrayed him and plotted against him. Therefore, he hated Jia Sherdao to the extreme. He would rather give it to someone else than Jia Sherdao. Only Zhao Go looked at Song Qingshu's back with resentment. He didn't believe that Song Qingshu had just arrived. He thought that he must have been hiding in the dark, waiting for him, Jia Sherdao, and King Yi to injure each other before coming out to reap the benefits. He had made up his mind that he would pretend to be courteous with him first, and when he returned to the capital, he would issue an edict to depose him as King of Qi. At the same time, he would announce that he had participated in Jia Sherdao's rebellion and call on the whole world to punish him. "So close, yet so far," Jia Sherdao murmured, thinking that the name was very appropriate. But he quickly came back to his senses. He looked at Song Qingshu and said, "Although you are good at martial arts, what can you do by yourself?" After saying that, he pointed at the injured people on the ground and ordered his soldiers, "Kill them." Although these people had lost the ability to fight back, they were all extraordinary people. In addition, they had just instructed Xiao Longnu and the others to almost cause him trouble, which reminded Jia Sherdao that keeping them alive would be a disaster, and it was better to get rid of them as soon as possible. Song Qingshu didn't seem to be worried. Instead, he said calmly, "Do you think you're the only one with subordinates?" Jia Sherdao was stunned. Suddenly, he heard a commotion from his soldiers. They screamed, "Snakes! There are snakes!" He turned around and found that the well-trained soldiers were panicking. The well-trained soldiers panicked, and their formation fell into disarray. When they looked at the ground again, they saw countless colorful snakes wandering around. They were obviously extremely poisonous. "Don't panic. Kill them first," Jia Sherdao yelled angrily. These people were well-trained, after all. Although most of them were thrown off their feet by the poisonous snakes, a few of them still found a chance to raise their crossbows and shoot at Wang Chongyang, Huang Chong, and the others. Seeing that these important people were about to be killed by the sharp arrows, a figure suddenly flashed in front of them and caught all the arrows. Ha ha ha, old Wang. I didn't expect that one day you would need me to save your life. A tall old man with yellow hair and beard stood next to Wang Chongyang, holding an arrow in his hand. He laughed proudly. I haven't seen you for a long time. Brother Feng's martial arts have improved. Wang Chongyang couldn't help but smile bitterly. The old man's expression suddenly changed. He snorted and said, I was severely injured by your single yang finger back then, and it cost me more than 10 years of my life. It's a pity that your martial arts are too good, and I'm usually not your match. But now, I really want to kill you with one slap. Wang Chongyang was speechless. Western poison Ouyang Feng. Jia Shidao frowned slightly. He had already recognized him. At this moment, another figure flashed by, and a sky full of palms slapped down on the crossbowmen, instantly ending their lives. Iron palm, floating on water? Jia Shidao was confused. Aren't you all working in the Jin Kingdom? Why are you with that song guy? Are the Jin people involved too? Thinking of this, he looked down the mountain worriedly. Qiu Qianren laughed and said, although we work in the Jin Kingdom, we are also Jianghu people. Wu-Tang Mountain is so lively. How could we not come to see the great master? I'm afraid you're not qualified. Jia Shidao raised his hand and shot out a whistling arrow. Soon, a group of people in yellow and cyan clothes came from the other side. These people were different from the soldiers. They were obviously Jianghu masters. They kept shooting hidden weapons, and soon Ouyang Feng's snake formation was disrupted. The soldiers gradually recovered from the chaos. Ouyang Feng's face twitched. Seeing his snake formation being slaughtered like this, his heart was bleeding. Bastard! He couldn't hold back anymore, and he jumped toward those people. The people in yellow and cyan clothes didn't fear him at all. Instead of being cut like vegetables by Ouyang Feng, they quickly put Ouyang Feng at a disadvantage. Seeing that, Qiu Qianren hurried to help, so Ouyang Feng didn't make a fool of himself. At this time, Song Qingshu reminded them, they are the good reward and evil punish messengers of the Isle of Heroes. Their kung fu is not weak. Don't let your guard down. Jia Shidao smiled coldly and said, I'm determined to win this trip to Wu-Tang Mountain, so I've sent almost all the good reward and evil punish messengers of the Isle of Heroes here. I don't believe that you guys can do anything. Zhu Banji's Jianghu masters guarding the way up the mountain had been messed up by Huang Yaoshi's melody of the rising tide. However, after so long, Zhu Banji's guards hadn't come, mainly because they were stopped by the masters of the Isle of Heroes. After all, King Yu wasn't stupid. If Jia Shidao had only sent Shirpatian and ignored the others, he wouldn't have cooperated with him. However, he didn't expect Jia Shidao to be a great master. The other soldiers wanted to kill the wounded on the ground, but Song Yuanxiao and Yu Lianzhou came with the Wu-Tang Mountain disciples and stopped them. The two sides were evenly matched. The Wu-Tang clan isn't controlled. If it were before, King, he would have cursed. But now he just wanted to give Li Qingluo a thumbs up and say, well done. Jia Shidao looked at Li Qingluo, and Xiao Long knew and said in a deep voice, so you and the Wu-Tang clan are acting together. It makes sense. You guys don't have a clear relationship with Song Yuanxiao, so why would you really attack the Wu-Tang clan? Where's Zhang Sanfeng? Call him out. After all, this was what he was most afraid of. Wu-Tang disciples like Song Yuanxiao and Yu Lianzhou couldn't change the situation. Hearing Zhang Sanfeng's name, even Wang Chongyang, Huang Chong, and the others were moved. Although there hadn't been a convincing ranking in Jianghu, Zhang Sanfeng was still considered the most powerful man in the world by most people. If he was here, who could be his opponent? Song Qingshu answered, I don't need to bother my great master to deal with you. I can deal with you alone. Jia Shidao rolled his eyes and couldn't help but laugh. It seems that the attack from the Hidden Mountain Villa wasn't in vain. Zhang Sanfeng is either dead or seriously injured. He knew that if Zhang Sanfeng was safe and sound, there was no need for him to hide at this time. The two great grandmasters could crush him with their absolute strength. Why would they let their disciples come out and take the risk? Moreover, with Zhang Sanfeng's character, firstly, he disdained to play these underhanded tricks with Song Qingshu. Secondly, if he were unharmed, he would definitely not sit idly by and watch as his seclusion ground was ruined to such an extent. Song Qingshu said calmly, "So what? I've already said that I can deal with you alone." Jia Sherdao snorted, "I have so many masters under me. Your people can't hold on much longer." Song Qingshu glanced over. Although Ouyang Feng and Qiu Qian's martial arts were very high, the Isle of Heroes' messengers' reward, kindness, punishing, and evil were not weak either. Moreover, they had the advantage in numbers. Relying on others is not as reliable as relying on your own strength. Song Qingshu sighed and suddenly said in a loud voice, "If you want the antidote, you know what to do now." Jia Sherdao was stunned. He didn't understand what he meant. Suddenly, the people of the Isle of Chivalry changed. Zhang San and Li Si attacked the other messengers. Those people didn't expect that their companions would suddenly attack them, and many of them were instantly injured. It took them a lot of effort to calm down, but the situation was already reversed. Zhang San and Li Si, "Do you know what the price of betraying me is?" Jia Sherdao shouted angrily. Zhang San smiled bitterly. "Prime Minister, it's nothing more than death. But we were hit by his life-death spell in the Vulture Palace. If we don't listen to him, we'll beg for death." Jia Sherdao turned around and glared at Song Qingshu. "Very good. I didn't expect you to be so calculative at such a young age. You planted a spy beside me from the very beginning. I'm no match for you in terms of scheming." Song Qingshu shrugged. "Can we start now?" Jia Sherdao grinned. "You and I are at the same level. Do you really think you can beat me?" Song Qingshu took a step forward. "One-on-one, you'll definitely die." There seemed to be an invisible aura around him. Jia Sherdao took a step back subconsciously. He was a little angry at himself for retreating. However, he knew that although he was at a high level, he had been pampered all these years, and he didn't have many opportunities to fight. At the same level, he was at a disadvantage compared to the people in the Jianghu who fought all day long. Jia Sherdao quickly calmed himself down and made a gesture toward the south. "I'm a man of wealth. I don't need to fight a desperate man like you." Jia Sherdao quickly composed himself and gestured to the south. Then a figure slowly walked over. He was wearing a yellow Taoist robe, and he looked like a Taoist priest. Many people were shocked, wondering if it was Zhang Sanfeng. Only the people of the Wu-Tang clan knew Zhang Sanfeng's dressing style. Plus, he was injured, so it was impossible for him to be here. Please remember the domain name of this book, .com. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2023. As the man's face was revealed, the sweeping monk, the drunkard monk, and the others were all confused. Only Wang Chongyang and a few others seemed to be thinking. "Jia Jing," Zhao Go exclaimed. Jia Jing was the heir of Duke Ning, so he had been to the palace to see the emperor. But most of the time, he lived in seclusion, making elixirs in a Taoist temple all day long. Many people in Lin and said that he was possessed. If he ate elixirs like that, he wouldn't live long. Because he hadn't shown up in public for many years, many people thought he had died from taking too many elixirs. They didn't even remember his existence. Even Zhao Go had to think for a long time to recognize him. At this time, Huang Chang and the others looked at each other and saw the same confusion in each other's eyes. Another great master? This great grandmaster was too worthless. Every one of them was a legendary figure in the Jianghu. Every one of them had either created an amazing ultimate skill or had a legendary battle record. Every one of them was an existence that resounded like thunder in the ears of the world. But Jia Sherdao and his brother were beyond everyone's understanding. They had never heard of them practicing martial arts. How could they be great masters? And both of them were great masters? Dragon Island Master? Sure, Potion's shout woke everyone up. Jia Jing was the Dragon Island Master? Everyone was shocked. Who was Jia Sherdao? As if he had seen everyone's confusion, Jia Sherdao laughed and said, "People only know that there are 2 Dragon Island Masters on the Island of Heroes, but they don't know that there are actually two Dragon Island masters. Everyone was confused at first, but they were all smart people, so they quickly understood. Jia Sherdao was a powerful minister in the imperial court. The government affairs in the imperial court were complicated enough, and he had to go to the court often. Naturally, he didn't have much time to take care of things in Jianghu. When he was away, he had to ask someone else to take care of things on the Island of Heroes. However, to be in charge of such an important department like the Island of Heroes, one had to be powerful enough, and the other had to be one of his own people. After thinking about it, his cousin Jia Jing was the best candidate. Everyone in the capital knew that Jia Jing hid in a Taoist temple all day to seek immortality, so it was a good cover for him. At this time, Song Qingshu looked at Shi Patian and asked, "Little brother, did you tell them how to decipher the patterns on the stone wall?" Shi Poxiangxia subconsciously nodded and said, "Yes, I was invited to the island by the two island masters, and I coincidentally learned the martial arts on the stone wall. Those martial arts belonged to them. Of course, I wouldn't hide it from them." No wonder. Song Qingshu nodded to himself. Unlike Shi Patian, Dragon Island Master and Jia Sherdao were already masters at the Grandmaster level. Now that they knew the correct way to practice the Taishan Sutra, they were like tigers that had grown wings. In comparison, Shi Potian's martial arts foundation was too shallow. He had accidentally learned the pictures on the stone wall. Although he was already a top master in Jianghu, he was still one step away from becoming a real grandmaster. Of course, Song Qingshu wasn't worried at all, because he had taken the best part of the Taishan Sutra. The tadpole text in the secret room was even more important than the Sanskrit general principles in the Nining Sutra. Without the best part, they would never be able to use the true power of the Taishan Sutra. "How did you know about the patterns on the stone wall?" Jia Sherdao suddenly turned around and stared at him sharply. He even had all kinds of guesses in his mind, wondering if he had been to the Island of Heroes, or if he had something to do with Baoyu's disappearance. Song Qingshu smiled and said, "You're not the only one who has an intelligence network. I have my own channels of information, too." As he spoke, he subconsciously glanced at Zhang San and Li Si, who were in the middle of the battle. Now that he was facing two great grandmasters, he didn't dare to be careless. He naturally had to find a way to give them false information, and at the same time, hide his strength in preparation for the upcoming battle. In this regard, he admired Xiao Feng in the original work. The reason why Xiao Feng was recognized as the god of war was that every time he fought, no matter how strong or weak his opponent was, he would always use all of his strength to fight. When facing second or third-rate masters like Elder Tan and Granny Tan, he had to be extremely vigilant in case they hurt him. Xiao Feng always imagined the worst at the beginning. For example, he was worried that he wouldn't be able to defeat Morong Fu and Yu Tanji at the same time. When Liao rebelled against the king of Chu, he also thought he was going to die. Who knew that the situation would be reversed the next moment? That was why in the original work, Xiao Feng had never lost a battle. He wasn't like Duan Yu or Zhang Wuji, who wore godly equipment but were often beaten by people who weren't as good as they were. However, although this was good for the actual battle, there was also a disadvantage. That was, Xiao Feng would use all of his strength when he attacked. If he wasn't careful, he could easily hurt his own people, which would lead to irreversible consequences. For example, Azu at Little Mirror Lake. As expected, Jia Sherdao was misled by the look in his eyes. He suddenly felt relieved. He thought that when this was over, he would definitely let Zhang San and Li Si, the two traitors, know what it meant to be better off dead than alive. At that moment, Dragon Island Master glanced at Island Master Mu, who was lying not far away. He frowned but didn't say anything. This was the internal fight of the Rongwa Mansion, and it had nothing to do with the Ningwa Mansion. In case anything unexpected happens, we'd better get rid of him as soon as possible. Dragon Island Master immediately turned his attention to Song Qingshu. Song Qingshu gestured for Xiao Long Nu to hide aside, and then said proudly, "You two can come at me together." Jia Sherdao was so angry that he laughed. How arrogant! Dragon Island Master also looked at him. "Young man, How arrogant you are. Song Qingshu smiled faintly. If I didn't say that, would you fight me alone? The two of them held their breath, and they couldn't say a word. You're just trying to talk big. Dragon Island Master snorted and didn't say anything else. He slowly raised his right hand. At first, he was holding nothing in his hand, but as he raised his hand higher and higher, there seemed to be a sort of nothingness in his hand. Jia Sherdao made a strange gesture. He clenched his fist as if he was holding a transparent wine cup in his hand, and he was going to drink it. The sweeping monk's eyes froze. He recognized that he had just been injured by this punch. The two of them locked their auras on Song Qingshu, who was in the center. The whole bamboo forest moved even though there was no wind, and the atmosphere was extremely chilling. Huang Chang and the others couldn't help but nod. The Taishan Sutra is indeed worthy of its reputation. The great masters had experienced many things in their lives. Even if they died here, they wouldn't have many regrets. Being able to see the legendary Taishan Sutra with their own eyes before they died was even more gratifying. Song Qingshu was the only one who recognized the two's moves. The Dragon Island Master's move should be the starting move of taking off the sword and crossing the knee, while Jia Sherdao's move was the fist technique contained in 3 cups of breath promise. The two of them had indeed practiced the martial arts moves on the stone wall to the extreme. Huang Chang couldn't help but ask, "Who do you think will win?" The great masters had been carried together by the disciples of the Wu-Tang sect and left in a relatively safe corner, so they decided to have a tea party. Dojo Monk thought for a while and answered, "If it were one-on-one, I think Almsgiver Song would win. But one-on-two, it would be too difficult." He didn't say it directly, but it was clear what he meant. Xiao Long Nu and the yellow-robed woman were suddenly nervous. Wang Chongyang shook his head and said, "I think at least little brother won't lose." Although there was a big gap between their ages, in Jianghu, Song Qingshu's martial arts were already at the same level as theirs, so no one objected to him calling him little brother. Back in the Chongyang Palace, Wang Chongyang had used the Big Dipper formation with all his strength, but still hadn't been able to defeat him. Looking at his martial arts now, it was obvious that he had made great progress. Although Jia Sherdao and the yellow-robed woman were great masters, they weren't as strong as Wang Chongyang alone. Even if the two of them joined forces, they might not be able to defeat each other. However, thinking of how he had been restrained when fighting against Huang Chang and Dojo Monk, he wasn't so sure about Song Qingshu's outcome. Hearing him say this, the women's hearts calmed down a little. At that moment, the sweeping monk suddenly said, "I think Song Qingshu will win." "Oh, why?" The others couldn't help but ask. Although they had just been injured by him, they were all in the same situation now. They had lived for most of their lives, so there was nothing they couldn't accept. The sweeping monk smiled but didn't say anything. In his mind, he remembered how the masters of the Shaolin Temple had surrounded Song Qingshu and been seriously injured by him. He had appeared to save him, and the little golden man in Song Qingshu's eyes was like a shadow. Even thinking about it now, he still felt a little scared. At his level of martial arts, it could be said that he was the best in the whole martial arts world, and almost nothing could bring him a sense of crisis. However, at that time, a flash of gold in Song Qingshu's eyes made his hair stand on end. That feeling was something he had never felt before. Seeing that he was keeping them in suspense, the other great masters were secretly dissatisfied. They thought, "If you don't tell us, can't we see for ourselves?" Only Huang Chang seemed to be deep in thought. Clearly, he also remembered when he had fought against Song Qingshu in the Imperial Palace, and how he had held back his attack. At that moment, they had already exchanged blows. The Dragon Island Master made the first move. He had originally looked old and clumsy, but when he made his move, it was as if he had instantly become a vigorous young man. His whole body seemed to flash, and his figure kept appearing in all directions around Song Qingshu. The sword of nothingness in his hand pierced toward Song Qingshu from all sorts of strange angles. Is this the sword technique of the Supreme Mystery Sutra? In the whole martial arts world, I think only the Sword Demon's solitary 9 swords can match it. Wang Chongyang couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. His attainments in swordsmanship were extremely profound, and with just a few glances, he could tell that this sword technique was much more profound than his Chuanjin sword technique. Of course, his Chuanjin sword technique was moderate and gentle, suitable for martial artists of all levels to practice. It was a martial art that truly benefited the whole martial arts world. The Dragon Island Master's sword technique had a very high requirement for skill, and there weren't many people in the martial arts world who were suitable to practice this sword technique, so it was not suitable to be popularized. Huang Chong snorted. I think the ancient Toon Sect's pure heart of Jade Maiden sword technique improved by the Bixia sword manual is not bad, but the young lady's skill is too weak. If you were to use it, it would definitely be better than the Dragon Island Master's sword technique. Wang Chongyang laughed awkwardly. I don't know my shitty's left and right inter fighting technique, so I can't use the sword with both hands like Miss Long. With his eyesight, he could naturally tell that Xiao Long Nu must have received guidance from Zhou Baotong, which is why she could use the Chuanjin sword technique with one hand and the Jade Maiden sword technique with the other. The drunkard monk laughed. With you and Miss Lin working together, who in the world can beat you? These great masters all knew about the trivial matter between Wang Chongyang and Lin Chaoying, so they wanted to use this to make fun of him. Wang Chongyang's face heated up. Matters of the heart. What are you, a monk, no? The sweeping monk on the side didn't have the mind to care about their romantic past. Looking at the battlefield, he mumbled, I feel that the power of this sword technique is mostly due to this set of light footwork. First set a small goal, such as 1 second. Chapter 2024. The drunkard monk also nodded in agreement. Yes, this set of footwork is indeed strange. When running, it is like a galloping horse. When attacking in a small area, there is no sign of advance or retreat. In the entire Jianghu, it is also the top lightness skill. Wang Chongyang sighed. Unfortunately, compared with Song Qingshu's lightness skill, it is still a lot worse. During the battle at Chongyang Palace, Song Qingshu's so close, yet worlds apart, had filled him with awe. It had even faintly opened the door to a higher realm for him. Thus, in his heart, if one were to talk about the number one lightness technique in the world, it would definitely be Song Qingshu. His lightness skill is indeed beyond the reach of human beings. At this time, Huang Chang's mind was thinking of the scene in the Lin and Imperial Palace when Yi Fuqian went up to the sky to pray for rain, which was indeed beyond his understanding. Although the Dragon Island Master's lightness skill was excellent, none of them were worse than him. However, compared with Song Qingshu, there was a world of difference. Thinking of how he had sneaked into the Imperial Palace several times and how he couldn't catch up with him, Huang Chang suddenly felt that his teeth were itching. Hearing that the great master seemed to have become Song Qingshu's fans, Xiao Long Nu, who had been as cold as ice, slightly raised her lips and showed a faint smile. The yellow-robed woman on the side saw her reaction and couldn't help but sigh secretly. Just now, when Song Qingshu came, he had been hugging her and asking about her well-being, but he didn't even talk to her. Such a difference made her joy when she first saw Song Qingshu disappear. Although she felt a little sad, she still looked at the field with worry. No matter how much of a jerk Song Qingshu was, it was better than letting Jia Shidao's people become the winners. Facing the Dragon Island Master's attacks from all kinds of unpredictable angles, Song Qingshu's body was much slower. It was as if he was just taking a walk after dinner. His movements were extremely slow, but even with such a big difference in speed, the Dragon Island Master's storm-like attacks didn't even stab the corner of his clothes. Huang Chang couldn't help but sigh. No wonder he can be among the great masters at such a young age. His eyesight and control are even better than mine. The drunkard monk smiled bitterly. If I were in his place and faced the Dragon Island Lord's attack, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to do what he did. The other great grandmasters also nodded their heads in agreement. They had always felt that Song Qingshu had become a great grandmaster at such a young age, most likely because of all kinds of fortuitous encounters. It was only when they saw his response that they realized how heaven-defying his innate talent was. They thought to themselves, if he was given another few decades, to what extent would he grow to? Of course, these great grandmasters didn't know that they were actually underestimating themselves. It was important to note that the reason Song Qing-shu was able to walk so leisurely was largely because he was familiar with the Tai-Chien Sutra sword techniques, so he could often predict the enemy's moves. It was just that his reputation was out there, coupled with his outstanding Qigong. A group of people subconsciously thought that he had this ability, so they did not think in that direction. Jia Sherdao had been waiting for an opportunity. He had planned to wait for the Dragon Island Lord to stall Song Qing-shu, and when he showed a flaw, he would take advantage of the situation to attack and kill him with one strike. Just like how Wang Chongyang had sneak-attacked Huang Chong and the drunkard monk, and how he had sneak-attacked the sweeping monk. Unfortunately, after watching for a while, he found that the Dragon Island Lord was not a threat to Song Qing-shu at all. He didn't dare to wait any longer. If the Dragon Island Lord was killed, wouldn't he have a great advantage and be defeated by his opponent one by one? Jia Shurdao's palm strike even created a sonic boom, which made the great grandmasters secretly compare. Jia Shurdao was weak in experience and timing, but in terms of inner power and martial arts, he was no worse than them. Song Qing-shu sighed inwardly. Originally, he had finally found an opening with great difficulty. He had thought that he could severely injure the Dragon Island Lord in 3 moves, but Jia Shurdao did not give him the chance. With Jia Shurdao's participation, Song Qing-shu suddenly felt more pressure. Jia Shurdao and the Dragon Island Lord's martial arts were the same. One practiced the sword skills in the Tai-Chien Sutra, and the other practiced the fist skills in the Tai-Chien Sutra. Plus, they had the same Qigong and inner breath, so they were like fish in water when they worked together, which was more than 2. When 2 great grandmasters fought against one, there was no way they would lose, not to mention that the 2 great grandmasters could cooperate with each other, so it was even more certain that they would win. If Song Qing-shu was not very familiar with the martial arts of the Tai-Chien Sutra, he would have been able to resolve the crisis in advance, and they would not have been defeated. The 3 of them fought fiercely. Occasionally, when they fought, their genuine qi would spread, and even giant rocks would be turned into powder. Even Ouyang Feng, Qiu Qianren, and the messengers of the Isle of Heroes did not dare to face them directly, and they all kept a distance from them. The disciples of the Wu-Tang clan hurried to protect the wounded and retreated further away, so that they would not be affected. The woman in the yellow dress couldn't help but say, "King Qi doesn't seem to be in a good situation." Her acupoints had been unsealed by the disciples of the Wu-Tang clan, so she didn't join the other battles. Instead, she stayed to protect her master. Huang Chang nodded and said, Jia Shurdao and the Dragon Island Master seem to have practiced a special joint attack technique. Every attack is made with the power of both of them. It's not easy for Song Qing-shu to be able to withstand it until now. Dojo Monk also praised, "This method of joint attack is really powerful. If we knew it, I'm afraid we could have defeated Brother Chongyang within 10 moves." Wang Chongyang said indignantly, "Don't even think about it." They were able to practice this joint attack technique because their martial arts, inner energy, and movement techniques are of the same origin. That's why they were able to cooperate perfectly. How could anyone else learn it? Dojo Monk knew that he was telling the truth. Generally, all the sects in the Jianghu had their own formations. Because everyone learned the same things, they could gather numbers to fight against strong enemies. For example, each of the Chuanjin 7 was much weaker than Huang Yaoshi, but when they set up a formation together, they could compete with Huang Yaoshi. However, this kind of joint attack formation was only practiced by the younger disciples of the sections. When one's martial arts reached a certain level, he or she would fight alone and would never cooperate with others, let alone people in the Great Master Realm. First of all, it was difficult to reach the Great Master Realm, and every Great Master had their own path. There were countless sects in the Jianghu, but there were only so many Great Masters in the entire Jianghu. It was impossible for the same sect to send out 2 Great Masters, so naturally, they couldn't practice this kind of joint attack formation. Second of all, when one reached the Great Master Realm, he or she had his or her own pride. It was already difficult for them to cooperate with others to fight. Who would be so shameless as to practice this kind of joint attack formation with others? Shameless. The Grandmasters all looked down on Jia Sherdao and Xiao Luo at the same time. Xiao Long frowned and took a step forward. Wang Chongyang seemed to know what she was thinking, so he hurriedly said, "Don't be impulsive. Although your sword technique is good, you are too weak. I'm afraid you will be torn apart by the wind from their fight before you get close. It will only distract Song Qing and do nothing else." Although Xiao Long didn't like Wang Chongyang because of the ancestral rules of the ancient tomb sect, she knew that what he said was true, so she couldn't help but hesitate. Li Qingluo couldn't help but say, "Grandmaster, are we just going to do nothing and watch? If Jia Sherdao wins, we will definitely die." She was a descendant of the Xiaoyao sect, and the sweeping monk had just been seriously injured. She didn't want to ask the three great masters about it. The sweeping monk said, "Don't worry. Believe in Mr. Song." Seeing that he was so calm, Li Qingluo could only continue to watch the fight uneasily. Seeing that Song Qingshu had dodged another joint attack, Jia Sherdao wasn't surprised. Instead, he laughed and said, "Song, you're so close, yet worlds apart must have consumed a lot of internal energy. I like to see how many times you can use it." At the same time, he was secretly glad that Song Qingshu had used so close, yet worlds apart several times, and suddenly attacked from unexpected places. If the two of them hadn't cooperated and taken care of each other's weaknesses, he wouldn't have known how many times he would have died. With such a magical technique, so close, yet worlds apart, no one would be a match for him in a one-on-one fight. Jia Sherdao admired Song Qingshu, and at the same time, he made up his mind to take this opportunity to kill Song Qingshu. Otherwise, he would definitely become a big problem. He knew that he couldn't take the Dragon Island Master with him all the time. Once he was alone, he would be easily killed by Song Qingshu. How could he let that happen? Normally, Song Qingshu wouldn't be able to stop him with his lightness skills. But now there were so many disciples of the Wu-Tang sect here, and his father and uncles were all there. He also had a confidant like Xiao Long. Besides, it was said that the yellow shirt woman also had an ambiguous relationship with him. With so many people he cared about, how could he leave? So, today was the best opportunity to kill him. Song Qingshu, who was dozens of feet away, didn't say anything. He opened his hands and slowly raised them up. The swords and knives scattered on the ground seemed to be attracted by an invisible force. They gradually rose into the air and formed a rain of swords and knives around him. Million swords returned to origin. Many people had seen Song Qingshu use this technique, and they couldn't help but exclaim. The others looked at the swords and knives in the sky, and they were also stunned. Oh no! Unlike the ordinary experts, the Earth Sweeper monk and Huang Chong frowned, and a hint of confusion flashed in their eyes. "What's wrong?" Li Qingluo and the yellow-shirt woman asked in unison. Although Xiao Long didn't say anything, she also pricked up her ears to listen. Wang Chongyang explained, "This technique of Song Qingshu is indeed powerful. It can cause indiscriminate damage to enemies in all directions. If we were to face thousands of soldiers on the plains at the same time, we would have nowhere to hide and could only fight them head-on. Even if we were great masters, we would probably be killed by the army." However, Song Qingshu relied on this move to enter an unstoppable state amidst thousands of soldiers and horses. It's just that a group attack technique means that the power is scattered, which means that the power of each point is weaker. Of course, this weakness is relative. The power of million swords returned to origin is enough to deal with most experts, but it's not enough to deal with great masters. Li Qingluo said worriedly, "Fighting two great masters at the same time for so long, he's already exhausted a lot of his inner power. Isn't he just wasting his inner power by using a technique like this?" The Earth Sweeper monk answered, "As far as I know, he isn't such a reckless person. He probably has his reasons for doing this." That's right. Huang Chong had fought with Song Qingshu several times. and he didn't look like such a reckless person. At that moment, Jia Sherdao laughed in the distance. Song Qingshu, you're courting death. When it came to Song Qingshu, he had long since prepared detailed information on him. Naturally, he recognized the sect origin 10,000 Swords and had analyzed its advantages and disadvantages. Now that Song Qingshu had actually tried to use this kind of area of effect skill to deal with two grandmasters, it seemed like he had been thrown into confusion by the two of them and had temporarily lost his mind. Please remember the domain name of this book.com. Wonderful Book House. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.